In the heart of a misty moor, a renowned falconer vanishes from a locked tower, leaving only a single feather and a cryptic note. The talon strikes at dusk. Why would Lord Edmund Harrow, master of Verndale Manor, stage his own disappearance? What secrets lie hidden in the ancient bloodline of his prized peregrine falcon? As Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson unravel a web of jealousy, betrayal, and a shadowy smuggling ring, each clue pulls them deeper into a world of coded ciphers, secret societies, and a deadly chase across London's underbelly to the cliffs of Cornwall. Will Holmes outwit a cunning rival, or will the falconer's legacy vanish forever? Dive into a mystery where every wing beat hides a secret and every shadow holds a threat. Chapter 1. The Vanishing at Verndale Manor. The wind howled across the moors, a mournful wail that seemed to carry secrets older than the gnarled oaks clinging to the rocky slopes. Sherlock Holmes stood at the edge of Verndale Manor's sprawling estate, his sharp eyes scanning the mist that draped the landscape like a shroud. Beside him, Dr. John Watson shivered, pulling his overcoat tighter against the damp chill. The summons had arrived at Baker Street that morning, urgent and cryptic, penned in the elegant hand of Lady Amelia Harrow, daughter of the missing lord. Edmund Harrow, a falconer of unmatched renown. Holmes, Watson said, his breath visible in the cold air. This place feels like it's holding its breath. Do you suppose Lord Harrow simply wandered off? Holmes's lips twitched into a faint smile, though his gaze remained fixed on the manor's silhouette, its Gothic spires piercing the fog. Wandered off, Watson? A man of Harrow's precision, vanishing during his own hunting party, leaving no trace but a single feather. No, this is no mere misstep. We are dealing with a mind that orchestrates its own absence. The manor loomed before them, its stone facade weathered by centuries of storms. Ivy clung to the walls, curling like fingers around the tall windows, some of which flickered with the warm glow of candlelight. The hunting party, a gathering of England's elite falconers and their patrons, had been in full swing the previous evening when Lord Harrow disappeared. According to Lady Amelia's letter, he had excused himself after dinner, ostensibly to check on his prized falcons in the estate's tower. He had not returned that as Holmes and Watson approached the grand oak. Doors, they swung open to reveal Lady Amelia, a woman in her late 20s with auburn hair pinned tightly and eyes red-rimmed from worry. Her composure, however, was steely, a testament to her upbringing in a house where discipline was as vital as air. Mr. Holmes. Dr. Watson, she said, her voice steady despite the strain etched into her features. Thank you for coming so quickly. My father, he is not a man to vanish without reason. I fear something terrible has happened. Holmes inclined his head, his eyes already darting over the entrance hall, taking in the polished marble floor, the ancestral portraits, and the faint scuff marks near the base of a grand staircase. Tell me everything, Lady Amelia, he said, stepping inside. Omit no detail, however trivial it may seem. They were led to a drawing-room where a fire crackled in a massive hearth, casting shadows that danced across tapestries depicting falconry scenes. Lady Amelia recounted the events of the previous night. The party had been a celebration of her father's latest triumph, the successful breeding of a rare peregrine falcon, a bird said to be unmatched in speed and grace. Guests had included fellow falconers, local gentry, and a few foreign dignitaries with an interest in the sport. Dinner had been served at 8, and Lord Harrow had been in high spirits, regaling the company with tales of his bird's prowess. At 9:30 he had risen, citing a need to ensure his falcons were settled for the night. He never returned. Lady Amelia said, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. We searched the tower, the grounds, even the moors until dawn. Nothing. Only this was found on his chair at the dining table. She produced a single feather, its silvery gray hue shimmering in the FIROI gel IGHT. Holmes took the feather, turning it between his fingers. A peregrine's primary feather, he murmured. Freshly plucked, not naturally shed. Curious. He handed it to Watson, who examined it with a physician's care, noting its pristine condition. Was the tower locked when you searched it? Holmes asked. Yes, Lady Amelia replied. The door was bolted from the inside, and the windows are too narrow for a man to pass through. We had to break the lock to enter. Inside, everything was in order: his tools, the falcon's perches, even his coat hanging by the door, but he was gone. Holmes's eyes gleamed with that peculiar intensity that Watson knew signaled the scent of a puzzle. And the guests? Any unusual behavior? Lady Amelia hesitated. Most were concerned, helping with the search. But Sir Rowland Vex, a rival of my father's, seemed oddly detached. He left early, claiming urgent business in London. Vex. Holmes repeated, his tone neutral, but his mind clearly turning. A man whose falcons have never bested harrows. Interesting. Show me the tower, if you please. The falconry tower stood apart from the manor, a cylindrical structure of weathered stone topped with a conical roof. The moors stretched endlessly around it, their undulating hills swallowed by the mist. As they approached, Watson noticed the ground was soft from recent rain, yet no footprints marked the path to the tower. The door, now unbolted, creaked open to reveal a circular chamber. Perches lined the walls, occupied by 6 falcons, their hooded eyes glinting in the dim light filtering through narrow slits. The air smelled of straw and musk, and a workbench held an array of tools, jesses, bells, and gloves arranged with meticulous care. Holmes moved with purpose, his long fingers tracing the edges of the workbench, the perches, the walls. He paused at a window, peering out at the sheer drop to the moors below. No man climbed out here, he said, almost to himself, nor did he vanish into thin air. He knelt, examining the floor, and his fingers brushed against a faint groove near the base of a perch. With a gentle push, a panel in the wall clicked open, revealing a narrow compartment. Watson gasped. A hidden space. Could he have hidden there? Holmes shook his head. Too small for a man, but large enough for this. He withdrew a coiled rope, knotted at intervals, and a small iron hook. A pulley system, ingeniously concealed. Someone lowered themselves from this tower, and I suspect it was Lord Harrow himself. But why? Lady Amelia asked, her voice trembling. Why would he stage such a thing? That, Lady Amelia, is the heart of the matter, Holmes replied. He pocketed the rope and turned to the workbench, where a scrap of paper caught his eye. It was tucked beneath a glove, almost invisible. Holmes unfolded it, revealing a scrawl in Harrow's hand. The talon strikes at midnight. Trust no one. Watson frowned. A warning? Or a plan? Both, perhaps, Holmes said. The feather, the locked tower, the rope, this was no abduction. Lord Harrow orchestrated his own disappearance. But for what purpose? We must learn more about his enemies, his allies, and that peregrine he prized so dearly. They returned to the manor, where the remaining guests were gathered in the dining hall. Their faces a mix of worry and suspicion. Sir Rowland Vex's absence was noted, but Holmes's attention was drawn to a groundskeeper, a wiry man named Tobin, who lingered at the edges of the room, his eyes darting nervously. Holmes approached him, his manner deceptively casual. "Tobin, is it?" Holmes sighed. "You tend the falcons, I presume. Tell me, was Lord Harrow's peregrine, the one recently stolen, of particular significance?" Tobin's hands twitched. "Aye, sir. That bird, Artemis, was his pride. Worth a fortune, some say. Stolen 2 weeks ago, right from the tower. Broke his lordship's heart. Stolen from a locked tower." Holmes pressed. "How curious! And you saw nothing?" Tobin shook his head too quickly. "Nothing, sir. I swear it." Holmes smiled thinly. "We shall see." He turned to Watson and Lady Amelia. "Watson, we must make for London. Sir Rowland. Vex's sudden departure is no coincidence, and I suspect he knows more than he lets on. Lady Amelia, keep your household vigilant. If your father is alive, he is playing a dangerous game." As they boarded the carriage back to the station, Watson couldn't shake the unease that clung to him like the moorland mist. "Holmes, do you think Harrow's alive?" "I am certain of it," Holmes replied, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "The feather was a message, Watson. He wants us to follow. And follow we shall, to the heart of this feathered conspiracy." The carriage rattled on, the moors fading into the distance, but the mystery of Lord Harrow's vanishing was only beginning to unfold. Holmes's mind was already racing, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that promised danger, deception, and the sharp talons of truth. The journey to London was a quiet one, with Holmes lost in thought, his fingers drumming a silent rhythm. On the carriage window, Watson, accustomed to his friend's silences, took the opportunity to reflect on the case. Lord Harrow's disappearance was unlike any they had encountered. The locked tower, the hidden pulley, the cryptic note all pointed to a man who had chosen to vanish, but the question of why gnawed at Watson. Was it to protect his beloved falcon Artemis? Or was there a deeper motive, one tied to the rivalries and secrets of the falconry world? Upon arriving at Baker Street, Holmes wasted no time. He lit his pipe, filling the room with a haze of smoke, and spread a map of London across the table. "Vex is our key, Watson," he said. "A man of his ambition does not leave a gathering like Verndale's without reason. We must find him, and quickly." Watson nodded, though his mind lingered on Lady Amelia's pale face and the fear in her eyes. "Do you think she's in danger?" "Holmes? Not yet," Holmes replied. "But Harrow's note suggests a threat he could not ignore. The talon strikes at midnight, a poetic phrase but specific. We must assume it refers to a time, a place, or a person. Vex is the most likely candidate." Holmes dispatched a telegram to Inspector Lestrade, requesting information on Vex's recent movements. Within hours, a reply confirmed that Vex had been seen at the Black Talon, a seedy pub in Whitechapel known for its unsavory clientele. "A fitting haunt for a man like Vex," Holmes remarked. "We shall pay him a visit tonight." The Black Talon was a grim establishment, its windows grimy and its air thick with the scent of stale ale and tobacco. Holmes and Watson entered, blending into the crowd of rough-looking men and women. Holmes's eyes scanned the room, settling. On a corner table where Vex sat, his broad shoulders hunched over a tankard. Beside him was a man in a hooded cloak, his face obscured. Their conversation was low, but Holmes's keen ears caught fragments: feathered prize, midnight, and Harrow's folly. Watson leaned close. "Did you hear that? They're talking about Harrow." Holmes nodded, his expression unreadable. "Patience, Watson. We must not tip our hand." He signaled for a drink, using the moment to inch closer to Vex's table. The cloaked man rose abruptly, slipping out a side door, but not before Holmes caught a glimpse of a scar. Across his knuckles, a distinctive mark. Vex remained, oblivious to their presence. Holmes approached, his demeanor casual. "Sir Roland Vex, I presume?" "Sherlock Holmes. I'm investigating Lord Harrow's disappearance. Might we have a word?" Vex's eyes narrowed, but he gestured to a chair. "Harrow's run off, has he?" "Not surprised. Man's always been reckless with his birds and his secrets." Holmes smiled faintly. "Reckless, perhaps. But vanishing from a locked tower, that requires planning. Tell me, Sir Roland, what do you know of Artemis, the stolen?" "Peregrine?" Vex's hand tightened on his tankard. "Nothing. A bird's a bird. Harrow put too much stock in it." "Yet you left Verndale abruptly," Holmes pressed. "And here you are, discussing a feathered prize at midnight." Coincidence? Vex's face darkened, but he said nothing. Holmes stood, tipping his hat. "Good evening, Sir Roland. We shall meet again." Outside, Watson exhaled. "He's hiding something, Holmes." "That cloaked man, do you think he's—" "Involved? Undoubtedly," Holmes replied. "The scar on his knuckles matches a description of a smuggler known to traffic in rare animals. Vex is entangled in something larger than a simple rivalry. We must return to Baker Street and cross-reference." Our findings. Back at their lodgings, Holmes pored over his files, pulling out a dossier on the smuggling trade. "The peregrine, Artemis, is no ordinary bird," he said. "Its lineage traces back to a royal aviary prized for its rarity. If it was stolen, it was not for sport, but for profit. Vex, or his associate, may be part of a network dealing in such creatures." Watson frowned. But why would Harrow fake his disappearance over a bird? Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Not just a bird, Watson. A symbol. Harrow's note suggests he knows of a plot, one he could not confront openly. By vanishing, he draws his enemies into the open. We must follow the trail to Dover, where I suspect the next piece of this puzzle lies." As dawn broke over London, Holmes and Watson prepared for their journey. The case of the disappearing Falconer was no longer a simple vanishing, but a web of deception woven with the precision of a falcon's flight. Holmes's mind was alight with possibilities, and Watson, though weary, felt the familiar thrill of the chase. The feather, the note, the tower, all were pieces of a game Lord Harrow had set in motion. And Sherlock Holmes was determined to play it to its end. The chapter closed with Holmes standing at the window, the first light of morning casting his shadow across the room. "To Dover, Watson," he said. "The Talon strikes at midnight, and we shall be there to meet it." Chapter 2. Shadows of the falcon's flight. The morning mist clung to the moors like a shroud, curling around the jagged outlines of Verndale Manor as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson descended from their carriage. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of wet earth and pine, and the distant cry of a bird pierced the silence, sharp and fleeting. Holmes's sharp eyes scanned the estate, taking in the ivy-clad walls, the towering chimneys, and the falconry tower rising like a sentinel against the gray sky. His mind was already at work, piecing together the fragments of the mystery that had brought them here. The disappearance of Lord Edmund Harrow, Master Falconer, from his own locked tower during a grand hunting party. Watson, bundled in his overcoat, shivered slightly as he followed Holmes toward the manor's entrance. "A grim place, Holmes," he muttered, glancing at the mist-draped hills. No wonder Harrow's guests were rattled. A man vanishing into thin air in a place like this, it's enough to make anyone believe in ghosts. Holmes's lips twitched into a faint smile. Ghosts, Watson? No, the truth is far more tangible. A locked tower, a single feather, and untouched. Plate, each a thread in a tapestry of human intent. Our task is to weave them together. Inside, the manor buzzed with nervous energy. Servants moved silently, their faces pale, while the remaining guests, aristocrats and falconry enthusiasts, gathered in the grand hall, whispering theories about Harrow's fate. Lady Beatrice Harrow, the falconer's daughter, stood apart, her face a mask of controlled grief. Her dark eyes met Holmes's as he entered, and she inclined her head, summoning him with a quiet dignity. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she said, her voice steady but strained. "Thank you for coming. My father, he was the heart of this estate. To think he's gone, and in such a strange manner, it defies reason." Holmes's gaze softened, but his tone remained precise. "Reason, Lady Beatrice, is precisely what we shall apply. Tell me everything about the night he disappeared. Omit no detail, however trivial it seems." She recounted the evening, a lavish dinner, the hunting party in high spirits, Harrow's pride in his falcons on full display. He had retired early to the falconry tower, where he often worked late, tending to his birds. When he failed to return, a search revealed the tower locked from the inside, his dinner untouched, and a single peregrine feather on his chair. A note, scrawled in Harrow's hand, was found tucked beneath the plate. "The shadow flies before the light." Holmes's eyes gleamed at the mention of the note. "Curious," he murmured. "A deliberate clue, or a poetic flourish." "We shall see." He requested to see the tower at once. The falconry tower stood apart from the manor, a cylindrical stone structure with a heavy oak door. The lock was intact, the key still inside, as reported. Holmes examined the doorframe, his fingers tracing the wood for signs of tampering. Finding none, he stepped inside, where the air was thick with the musky scent of feathers and straw. The tower was a marvel of function. Perches lined the walls, each holding a hooded falcon, their talons clicking softly as they shifted. A narrow staircase spiraled to an upper platform, where a single window offered a view of the moors. Holmes's attention fixed on the platform. He climbed the stairs with purposeful strides, Watson trailing behind. At the top, he knelt, his magnifying glass hovering over the floorboards. "Here," he said, pointing to faint scratches near the window. "These are fresh. And this?" He plucked a thin, oiled rope from a crevice, barely visible against the stone. "A pulley system, Watson. Ingenious. Harrow didn't vanish, he descended." Watson frowned, peering out the window. The drop was steep, the ground below a tangle of brambles. Descended? To where? And why lock the door? Holmes coiled the rope, his expression unreadable. To stage his disappearance, of course. The locked door, the untouched meal, the feather, They're theatrical props. Harrow wanted us to believe he was taken, but he left of his own accord. The question is why? They returned to the manor, where Holmes questioned the staff. A groundskeeper, a wiry man named Thomas Finch, lingered nervously at the edge of the room. Holmes's gaze pinned him. "You, sir. You tend the falcons with Lord Harrow, do you not?" Finch nodded, his hands twisting. "Aye, sir. Been with his lordship 10 years. He loved them birds like family." "Particularly one bird, I understand," Holmes pressed. "A peregrine, rare and prized. I hear it was stolen recently." "Tell me about it." Finch's eyes darted away. "The Shadow Strike, we called her. Fastest bird I ever saw. Worth a fortune. Stolen a fortnight ago, right from her mews. His lordship was heartbroken, said he'd do anything to get her back." Holmes's expression sharpened. "Anything, you say? And did he suspect anyone?" Finch hesitated, then leaned closer. "He never said outright, but Sir Rowland Vex was here that week. Another falconer, and no friend to his lordship. They've feuded for years, ever since Vex lost a tournament to Harrow's birds. Vex was snooping about the mews the day Shadow Strike vanished." Holmes exchanged a glance with Watson. "Vex," he repeated. "A name worth pursuing. Where might we find him?" "In London, sir," Finch replied. "He's got a house in Mayfair, but he's often at the Black Talon, a pub in Cheapside. Shady place, full of falconers and worse." Holmes dismissed Finch with a nod, his mind already racing. "Watson, pack your bag. We're for London. The moor has given us its clues. The city will yield the rest." The journey to London was swift, the train rattling through the countryside as Holmes sat in silence, his fingers steepled. Watson, accustomed to his friend's meditative trances, busied himself with a newspaper, though his thoughts lingered on the case. The image of the locked tower, the cryptic note, and the stolen falcon gnawed at him. "Holmes," he ventured at last, "do you think Harrow's disappearance is tied to this feud with Vex? It seems a drastic step over a stolen bird." Holmes's eyes flickered open. "Drastic, yes, but not irrational. Falcons, Watson, are more than pets to men like Harrow. They're symbols of power, prestige, even legacy. The theft of Shadow Strike wasn't mere larceny, it was a blow to his very identity. If Vex is involved, we'll find the thread that connects the theft to Harrow's vanishing act." London greeted them with its usual clamor, the clatter of hooves, the shouts of vendors, the fog that clung to the gaslights. The Black Talon was a squat, dimly lit pub tucked in a narrow alley off Cheapside. Its sign, a carved falcon with outstretched wings, creaked in the wind. Inside, the air was thick with tobacco smoke and the low hum of conversation. Rough-looking men hunched over tables, their eyes sharp and wary. Holmes, in his plain tweed coat, blended effortlessly into the crowd, while Watson felt acutely out of place. They took a table near the back, where a group of men spoke in hushed tones. Holmes's ear caught fragments of their talk. Feathered prize, Dover Run, Vex's orders. His gaze sharpened, and he leaned toward Watson, his voice a whisper. "Listen, but don't react. We've stumbled into a nest of intrigue." The men's conversation grew more guarded, their words shifting to a code Watson couldn't follow. Holmes, however, seemed to absorb every syllable, his fingers tapping a silent rhythm on the table. When the group dispersed, one man, a lean figure with a scar across his cheek, lingered, glancing warily at Holmes. For a moment, their eyes locked, and Watson felt a chill. The man slipped out, leaving a scrap of paper on the floor. Holmes retrieved it with a casual sweep of his hand. The paper bore a single line: Dover, midnight, the cage opens. He tucked it into his pocket, his face alight with purpose. Watson, our quarry moves swiftly. Vex is no mere rival, he's entangled in something larger. We must follow this thread to Dover. As they left the pub, the fog thickened, swallowing the street in a gray haze. Watson's heart quickened, the weight of the mystery pressing against him. Holmes, undeterred, strode forward, his silhouette sharp against the mist. "The shadow flies before the light," he murmured, quoting Harrow's note. "And we shall chase it." The journey to Dover was a blur of planning and speculation. Holmes pored over the coated paper, his mind dissecting its implications. "A feathered prize suggests shadow strike," he said, "but the mention of a cage opening at midnight points to a transaction. Vex may be selling the bird or something more valuable to the highest bidder." Watson frowned. "But why would Harrow stage his disappearance over a bird, even a rare one? Surely he'd confront Vex directly." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Because, Watson, Harrow knows more than he's revealed. His disappearance wasn't flight, it was strategy. He's playing a deeper game, one we'll uncover in Dover." They arrived in Dover under a moonless sky, the cliffs looming like silent giants. The address on the paper led to a dilapidated warehouse near the docks, its windows boarded, its walls streaked with salt. Holmes signaled for silence as they approached, his senses attuned to every sound. A faint murmur drifted from within voices, low and urgent. He found a loose board, prying it open to reveal a sliver of light. Inside, a makeshift auction was underway. Men in cloaks bid on crates marked with strange symbols, their faces obscured. At the center, a cage held a peregrine falcon, its eyes gleaming like polished jet. Holmes's breath caught it was shadow strike, unmistakable from Finch's description. But his attention shifted to a figure in the shadows, bidding with quiet intensity. The man's posture, his gloved hand, Holmes knew at once it was Harrow, disguised but unmistakable. Before Holmes could act, a shout rang out. The scarred man from the pub had spotted them. Chaos erupted, bidders scattering as Vex's men drew knives. Holmes grabbed Watson, pulling him into the fray. "Stay close," he barked, dodging a blade. In the confusion, Holmes reached the cage, unlatching it to free shadow strike. The falcon soared upward, its wings a blur, and Harrow's figure vanished into the crowd. They escaped the warehouse, clutching a ledger snatched from a fallen thug. Back at their inn, Holmes pored over it, his face grim. "Names, dates, shipments," he said. "Vex is no mere thief. He's running a smuggling ring, trafficking rare birds across the channel. And Harrow, he's been tracking it, using his disappearance to draw Vex out." Watson stared, the pieces falling into place. "Then Harrow's alive, but still in danger. Where is he now?" Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Hiding, but not far. We'll find him, Watson, and the truth behind this feathered conspiracy." The chapter closed with the ledger's secrets burning in Holmes's mind, the falcon's cry echoing in the distance, and the promise of a deeper truth waiting in the shadows. Chapter 3. The cipher in the coop. The fog clung to London's cobblestone streets like a conspirator. shrouding the city in a damp, gray veil as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson stepped from their hansom cab. The pub, the Gilded Talon, squatted in a narrow alley off Drury Lane, its grimy windows flickering with the dim glow of gaslights. The air reeked of stale ale and wet coal, and the distant clatter of hooves and wheels faded into the mist. Holmes's sharp eyes scanned the alley, noting the uneven stones and a discarded cigar stub, its band embossed with a crest he recognized but did not yet name. "Stay close, Watson," Holmes murmured, his voice low, almost swallowed by the phaeton. "Fog. This place is a nest of vipers, and our quarry is likely among them." Watson nodded, his hand brushing the reassuring weight of his revolver in his coat pocket. The coded conversation they'd overheard the previous night mutterings of a feathered prize and a meeting here had set Holmes's mind ablaze. The disappearance of Lord Edmund Harrow, the falconer of Verndale Manor, was no simple vanishing act. The clues: a locked falconry tower, a single feather. A cryptic note pointed to a scheme far larger than a personal vendetta. Holmes suspected a connection to Sir Rowland Vex, a rival falconer whose envy of Harrow's skill was matched only by his ambition. Now, in this den of rogues, they sought answers. Inside, the Gilded Talon was a haze of smoke and raucous laughter. Rough men in patched coats and flat caps crowded around tables, their voices a din of coarse jests and clinking glasses. A barmaid, with tired eyes, wove through the throng, balancing mugs of frothy ale. Holmes, dressed in a nondescript tweed coat to blend with the crowd, led Watson to a shadowed corner booth. His gaze darted across the room, cataloging faces, postures, and the subtle tells of men with secrets. "There," Holmes whispered, nodding toward a table near the back. 3 men sat huddled, their heads bent close, their words inaudible over the din. One, a wiry figure with a scar across his cheek, wore a heavy coat despite the warmth of the room. Another, broad-shouldered and red-faced, clutched a tankard, his knuckles white. The third, half hidden in shadow, had a lean, predatory look, his fingers drumming a rhythm on the table. Holmes's lips twitched in recognition. "Vex's men," he said softly. "The wiry one is Caleb Finch, a smuggler known in Dover. The big one is Tom Bracken, muscle for hire. The third, I don't know him, but his manner suggests authority. Watch them, Watson." Watson squinted through the haze, his soldier's instincts sharpening. "What's the plan, Holmes?" "We listen," Holmes replied, his eyes never leaving the trio. "And we wait for a slip." The barmaid approached, and Holmes ordered 2 pints of bitter, his voice adopting a rough East End lilt to match their guise. As she shuffled away, he leaned closer to Watson. "The conversation we overheard last night mentioned a feathered prize and a meeting here. If Vex is involved, this is no mere theft of a peregrine. There's a network at play, Watson smugglers, perhaps, dealing in rare birds. Harrow's disappearance is the key to unlocking it." The minutes stretched, the pub's clamor a constant drone. Holmes's ears strained to catch fragments of the men's talk, but the noise was a barrier. Then the lean man stood, his chair, scraping the floor, and slipped a folded paper to Finch before vanishing through a back door. Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Watson, follow the big one. Bracken, if he moves. I'll pursue the leader. Meet me at the alley's end in 20 minutes. Before Watson could protest, Holmes was up, weaving through the crowd with the grace of a cat. Watson sighed, his hand tightening on his glass, and kept his eyes on Bracken, who was now arguing loudly with Finch. The wiry smuggler pocketed the paper and stood, heading for the door. Watson hesitated, then followed, keeping his distance. As Bracken lumbered after Finch into the fog, Holmes, meanwhile, tailed the lean man through a warren of alleys, his steps silent on the slick stones. The man moved with purpose, glancing over his shoulder only once. Holmes noted the man's boots' fine leather, out of place in this squalor, and a silver ring glinting on his finger, etched with a falcon's head. The trail led to a nondescript door in a crumbling warehouse. The man knocked twice, then once more, and the door creaked open. Holmes slipped into the shadows, waiting. Inside, the warehouse was a cavern of crates and flickering lanterns. The lean man conferred with two others, their voices low but urgent. Holmes caught snatches of their talk. Dover, auction. The Peregrine, Harrow's move. His pulse quickened. The peregrine, Harrow's prized bird, was the linchpin. But why an auction? And how did Harrow's stage disappearance fit? Holmes edged closer, risking discovery, when a floorboard creaked. Underfoot, the men froze. The lean man's hand darted to a knife at his belt, and Holmes melted back into the shadows, his heart steady despite the danger. The men resumed their talk, but the moment was lost. Holmes retreated, memorizing the warehouse's location for later. Back in the alley, Watson waited, his face grim. "Bracken gave me the slip," he admitted. "But I saw Finch pass that paper to a boy who ran off toward the docks." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "No matter, Watson, we have a lead. The warehouse is Vex's domain, and they spoke of an auction. In Dover, we must return to Vex's residence first. If he's smuggling rare birds, there'll be evidence." The journey to Vex's townhouse in Belgravia was swift, the cab rattling through streets now clearing of fog. The house, a grand Georgian affair, stood silent, its windows dark. Holmes picked the lock with practiced ease, and they slipped inside. The air was heavy with the scent of polish and old money. A mahogany desk dominated the study, its surface cluttered with ledgers and maps. Holmes's fingers danced over the papers, pausing at a locked drawer. "Watson, keep watch," he said, producing a slender pick. The lock yielded, revealing a bundle of letters and a small, ornate box. Inside the box was a brass key, etched with a cipher, a series of slashes and dots forming a crude bird. Holmes's mind raced, decoding it in seconds. "A substitution cipher," he murmured. The key reads, "Dover, Third Moon Black Market. The auction is in 3 days." Watson frowned. "But what of Harrow? Is he part of this?" Holmes shook his head. "Harrow's disappearance was a ruse to draw out his enemies. This cipher confirms it, but he's underestimated the danger. Vex is not merely jealous, he's orchestrating a smuggling ring, and Harrow's peregrine is the prize." Their search was interrupted by a soft thud from upstairs. Holmes motioned for silence, and they crept toward the sound. In a small room, they found a falcon's cage, its occupant a sleek peregrine with a jeweled collar. A scrap of paper was tied to the bars, covered in more cipher. Holmes pocketed it, his expression grim. "We've lingered too long," he said. Back to Baker Street. At 221B, Holmes spread the ciphered paper on the table, his pipe sending curls of smoke into the lamplight. The cipher was complex, a mix of symbols and numbers, but Holmes's mind was a machine, unraveling it with relentless precision. After an hour, he leaned back, his eyes alight. "It's a map, Watson. The auction is in a warehouse off Dover's cliffs, hidden in a smuggler's cove. But there's more, a list of names, buyers, and a reference to a feathered council. This is no mere black market. It's a syndicate, and Vex is its puppet." Watson's brow furrowed. "A syndicate? For birds?" "For power, Holmes." Corrected. "Rare falcons are worth fortunes to collectors, and control of their trade is control of wealth. Harrow stumbled into their web, and they want him silenced." A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Hudson ushered in a young woman, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. "Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice trembling, "I'm Eleanor Harrow, Lord Harrow's daughter. I know you're looking for my father. He wrote to me, saying he feared betrayal. Please, you must find him." Watson's heart went out to her, and he offered her a chair and a glass of brandy. "Miss Harrow, we're doing all we can," he said gently. "Your father is alive, we believe, and we're close to finding him." Holmes studied Eleanor, his gaze softening. "Miss Harrow, did your father mention anyone he distrusted? A name, perhaps?" She hesitated, then nodded. "He spoke of Sir Rowland Vex, and someone called the Keeper. He said the Keeper was watching him always." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "The Keeper. Thank you, Miss Harrow." "Rest assured, we will find your father." After she left, Watson turned to Holmes. "This Keeper, another player in the syndicate?" "Likely its head," Holmes said. "But we've no time to speculate. The auction is in 3 days. We must prepare to infiltrate it. I'll need to disguise a collector, wealthy and eccentric. You, Watson, will be my agent, arranging my entry." Watson nodded, though his stomach churned at the thought of another undercover mission. "And the cipher? The names?" Holmes tapped the paper. "We'll cross-reference them with known smugglers and collectors. Lestrade can help, though. Loath involving Scotland Yard. Their blundering may alert Vex." The next 2 days were a whirlwind of preparation. Holmes pored over maps of Dover's coastline, memorizing every cove and cliff. Watson scoured police records, identifying 2 names from the cipher, a Russian merchant and a French ornithologist, both linked to illegal trade. Holmes crafted his disguise, a garish velvet coat, a false beard, and a monocle, while Watson secured forged credentials for the auction. On the eve of their departure, Holmes stood by the window, staring into the night. "Watson," he said quietly, "this case is a labyrinth. Harrow's disappearance is but the first thread. The syndicate, the Keeper, the Peregrine, they're all connected, and the auction is the knot. We must tread carefully." Watson clapped a hand on his friend's shoulder. "We've faced worse, Holmes. We'll see it through." Holmes's lips curved in a rare smile. "Indeed, old friend." "To Dover, then." The train to Dover rattled through the dawn, its whistle piercing the mist. Holmes, now Monsieur Dubois, a French collector, sat with a book of ornithology, his eyes scanning the pages, but his mind elsewhere. Watson, dressed as a plane agent, watched the countryside blur past, his thoughts on Eleanor Harrow's tear-streaked face. Dover's cliffs loomed as they arrived, the sea a restless gray expanse. The warehouse, tucked in a cove, was a hulking shadow against the rocks. Holmes's forged credentials gained them entry, and they stepped into a world of opulence and deceit. The auction room was lit by chandeliers, its tables laden with cages of exotic birds, macaws, hawks, and, at the center, Harrow's peregrine, its eyes fierce and unyielding. Holmes mingled with the bidders, his accent flawless, his manner arrogant. Watson stayed at the edges, noting faces and whispered deals. The auctioneer, a gaunt man with a vulture's stare, called for bids. The peregrine's price soared, and Holmes raised his paddle, his eyes locked on a figure in the shadows. Man with a silver ring, the same falcon's head glinting. "That's him," Holmes whispered to Watson. "The lean man from the pub. He's Vex's lieutenant." The bidding grew frenzied, and Holmes played his part, driving the price higher to gauge reactions. The lean man's face tightened, and Watson saw him signal to two burly men near the Kimberley men near the face tightened, and Watson saw him signal to two burly men near the Fellingways. Door. Trouble was brewing. "Watson," Holmes murmured, "be ready. This may turn ugly." As the gavel fell, naming Holmes the winner, the lean man stood, his voice cutting through the din. "Stop. That man's a fraud." The room erupted. Bidders shouted, and Vex's men charged toward Holmes. Watson drew his revolver, firing a bifo. Warning shot into the ceiling. The crowd froze, and Holmes seized the moment, grabbing the peregrine's cage and bolting for a side door. Watson followed, the lean man's shouts echoing behind them. They burst into the cove, the sea crashing against the rocks. Holmes hid the cage behind a crate and turned to face their pursuers. The lean man emerged, knife in hand, but Holmes was faster, disarming him with a swift strike to the wrist. Watson tackled another thug, his fists a blur. "Enough." Holmes barked, holding the lean man at bay. "Who is the keeper?" The man spat, his eyes defiant. "You'll never find him. The peregrine's just the start." Holmes bound the man's hands with his own belt and turned to Watson. "We have the bird, but the ledger from Vex's study is the key. It lists the syndicate's members. We must return to Verndale and decode it fully." As they slipped away, the warehouse's lights dimmed, and the auction dissolved into chaos. Holmes carried the peregrine's cage, its occupant glaring with regal disdain. Watson's heart pounded, but he felt a surge of triumph. They had a piece of the puzzle, and Harrow was closer to being found. Back at Verndale Manor, the ledger lay open on a table, its pages a maze of names and transactions. Holmes traced a finger over the entries, his mind weaving connections. The keeper is here," he said, "a name we've overlooked. But first, we must protect Harrow's daughter. If Vex knows we're closing in, she's a target." Watson nodded, his resolve hardening. "What's our next move?" Holmes's eyes glinted. "We set a trap. Vex will come to us, and when he does, we'll have him." The chapter closed with the manor's windows rattling in the wind, the peregrine's sharp cry echoing through the halls. Holmes stood by the fire, the ledger in hand, his mind a storm of deduction. The auction had yielded clues, but the true battle lay ahead, and the shadow of the keeper loomed large. Chapter 4. The auction's dark wings. The overnight was thick with sea mist, the kind that clung to the skin and muffled the world in a damp shroud. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson stood at the edge of a cobbled alley, the distant crash of waves against the cliffs, a faint pulse beneath the murmur of the town. Holmes, disguised as a wealthy eccentric named Mr. Percival Thorne, adjusted the brim of his velvet top hat, its ostentatious feather catching the dim glow of a gas lamp. His frock coat, tailored to suggest opulence rather than practicality, hung loosely over a waistcoat embroidered with gold thread. Watson, less flamboyantly attired, but still playing the part of Thorne's loyal aide, clutched a leather satchel, his eyes scanning the shadows for trouble. "Are you certain this is wise, Holmes?" Watson whispered, his breath fogging in the chilly air. "This auction sounds like a den of vipers." Holmes's lips curved into a faint smile, his gray eyes glinting with the thrill of the chase. "Precisely why we're here, Watson. Vipers strike only when provoked, and I intend to do just that." They moved toward a nondescript warehouse at the alley's end, its weathered facade betraying nothing of the illicit dealings within. The cipher from Sir Roland Vex's home had led them here, to a secret auction where rare birds prized by collectors and criminals alike were traded like contraband. Holmes had decoded the cryptic message hidden in the falcon's cage. Dover. Midnight, the gilded cage. Lot 17. The peregrine falcon stolen from Lord Edmund Harrow was almost certainly Lot 17, and Holmes was determined to uncover who was behind the theft and whether Harrow himself was complicit or a victim. The warehouse door, heavy and iron-bound, creaked as a burly man in a tattered coat checked their forged invitation. His eyes lingered on Holmes's extravagant attire, then flicked to Watson's satchel, but he waved them through with a grunt. Inside, the air was thick with cigar smoke and the musky scent of feathers. A crowd of perhaps 50 soulsmen in tailored suits, women in veiled hats, and a few shadier figures in cloaks milled about under flickering chandeliers. Cages lined the walls, each housing a bird more exotic than the last. Parrots with plumage like tropical sunsets, owls with eyes like polished amber, and hawks that shifted restlessly on their perches. Holmes's gaze swept the room, cataloging every detail. "Observe, Watson," he murmured, nodding toward a raised platform at the far end, where an auctioneer in a crimson waistcoat prepared to begin. "The wealth here is ostentatious, yet the security is minimal. No guards at the exits, only that brute at the door. They rely on secrecy, not force." Watson frowned, his hand brushing the revolver hidden beneath his coat. "Secrecy won't help them if this goes wrong." "Do you see Harrow?" "Not yet," Holmes replied, his voice low. "But he'll be here. The peregrine is his obsession. He won't let it slip through his fingers." The auction began with a sharp rap of the auctioneer's gavel. The first lots were minor macaws and cockatoos sold to enthusiastic bidders, but the atmosphere grew taut as Lot 17 approached. Holmes leaned against a pillar, his posture casual, but his eyes darting to every face, every gesture. Watson, standing a step behind, noted the tension in the room. The way hands twitched toward pockets or whispered conversations halted when strangers drew near. At last, the auctioneer unveiled Lot 17. A hush fell over the crowd as a cage was brought forward, draped in black velvet. With a theatrical flourish, the cloth was pulled away, revealing a peregrine falcon, its slate-gray feathers gleaming under the chandelier light. Its eyes, fierce and unyielding, seemed to pierce the room. A murmur rippled through the crowd, and Watson caught the word "Harrow" whispered by a woman in a sapphire gown. Holmes's expression remained impassive, but his fingers tightened around his cane. "There," he whispered, tilting his head toward a man in the shadows near the platform. The figure wore a heavy cloak and a wide-brimmed hat, his face obscured, but his posture rigid. Almost predatory betrayed a familiarity. It was Lord Edmund Harrow, or a very convincing impostor. The bidding began at £1,000, an obscene sum that drew gasps. Harrow's hand shot up, his bid sharp and commanding. Another bidder, a gaunt man with a monocle, countered immediately, followed by a woman in a fur stole. The price climbed rapidly 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, until only Harrow and the monocled man remained. The auctioneer's voice grew fevered, egging them on. Holmes leaned toward Watson. The monocled man is Vex's agent. Note the ring on his left hand, a falcon crest. He's here to ensure Harrow doesn't reclaim his prize. Watson's brow furrowed. But why? If Vex stole the falcon, why not keep it? Control, Watson. Vex wants Harrow humiliated, his legacy tarnished. Selling the falcon publicly is a power play, not a profit scheme. The bidding reached £10,000, an unheard of sum. Harrow's hand trembled as he raised it again, his voice hoarse but resolute. The monocled man hesitated, then smirked, and withdrew, leaving Harrow the victor. The crowd erupted in murmurs, some admiring, others suspicious. The auctioneer slammed his gavel, declaring the peregrine sold, but before Harrow could claim his prize, chaos erupted. A group of rough-looking men Vex's enforcers no doubt burst from the shadows, overturning tables and smashing cages. Birds screeched, feathers flying as the crowd panicked. Holmes grabbed Watson's arm, pulling him toward a side door. "The ledger, Watson. It's our only chance to trace Vex's network." In the melee, Holmes spotted the auctioneer slipping behind a curtain, clutching a leather-bound book. With cat-like agility, Holmes darted through the chaos, dodging a swinging fist and a falling chandelier. Watson followed, his revolver drawn but held low, his heart pounding as he navigated the stampede of bidders behind the curtain. A narrow hallway led to a back room. The auctioneer, sweating and pale, clutched the ledger to his chest. "Stay back," he shouted, brandishing a knife. Holmes raised his hands, his voice calm but commanding. "We mean you no harm," Holmes said. His eyes locked on the man's. "But that ledger holds answers. Hand it over, and you'll walk away." The auctioneer hesitated, his grip faltering. Watson stepped forward, his revolver steady. "Do as he says," he growled, his tone leaving no room for argument. With a defeated sigh, the auctioneer tossed the ledger to Holmes, who caught it deftly. "You're mad to cross Vex," the man muttered, then fled into the night. Holmes flipped through the ledger, his eyes scanning the cramped handwriting. Names, dates, transactions all tied to the smuggling ring. Harrow's name appeared repeatedly, linked to payments and debts. "He's not just a victim," Holmes murmured. "He's entangled in this web, willingly or not." The sound of boots echoed down the hallway, Vex's men closing in. Holmes tucked the ledger into Watson's satchel. "We must leave now." They slipped through a side exit into the misty night, the chaos of the auction fading behind them. The ledger was a prize worth the risk, but Holmes knew it was only a piece of the puzzle. Harrow's presence at the auction, his desperation for the peregrine, and Vex's orchestrated attack all pointed to a deeper conspiracy, one Holmes was determined to unravel. As they hurried toward the docks, Watson glanced at Holmes. "Did you see Harrow escape?" Holmes nodded, his expression grim. "He vanished in the chaos, but not before I saw the fear in his eyes. He's running, Watson, but not from us. We must find him before Vex does." The night stretched on, the mist curling around them like a living thing. The ledger's secrets burned in Holmes's mind, each name a thread in a tapestry of betrayal. The case of the disappearing Falconer was far from solved, but with the ledger in hand, Holmes felt the thrill of progress, a step closer to the truth. The journey back to Verndale Manor was a tense one, the ledger weighing heavily in Watson's satchel. The train rattled through the pre-dawn gloom, its rhythm a counterpoint to Holmes's relentless pacing in their private compartment. He had not spoken since Dover, his mind a whirl of deductions, each page of the ledger a new variable in his mental equation. Watson, ever the pragmatist, broke the silence. "Holmes, what does it mean? Harrow bidding for his own falcon, Vex's men causing that uproar, it's madness." Holmes paused, his silhouette sharp against the window's gray light. "Not madness, Watson. Strategy. Harrow staged his disappearance to draw out his enemies, but he's underestimated Vex's reach. The ledger confirms Vex is not just a rival but a puppet master, pulling strings across a network of smugglers and collectors." Watson frowned, flipping open the ledger to a page marked with Harrow's name. These payments, thousands of pounds to unknown parties. Was Harrow buying silence or something else? "Both, perhaps," Holmes replied, settling into his seat at last. Harrow's obsession with his falcons made him vulnerable. Vex exploited that, but there's another player, someone financing Vex's moves. The ledger mentions a benefactor with no name, only a symbol, a talon clutching a coin. Watson's eyes widened. A secret society. Holmes's smile was thin. Or a single, very powerful individual. We'll know more at Verndale. Harrow's daughter may hold the key. She mentioned his fear of betrayal. She knows more than she's told us. The train pulled into Verndale station as dawn broke, painting the moors in hues of gold and shadow. The manor loomed in the distance, its turrets piercing the mist like sentinels. Watson felt a chill, not from the cold, but from the weight of the mystery. Harrow was alive, but for how long? And what secrets did the ledger hold that could bring down a man like Vex? At the manor, Harrow's daughter, Lady Eleanor, greeted them with red-rimmed eyes. Her composure had frayed since their last meeting, her hands twisting a lace handkerchief. "Have you found him?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Holmes's tone was gentle but firm. "We've found evidence, Lady Eleanor. Your father was at an auction in Dover, bidding for his stolen peregrine. He's alive, but in danger. Tell me, what did he fear most before he vanished?" Eleanor hesitated, her gaze darting to the window. "He spoke of enemies within his circle, falconers he trusted. He said they coveted his birds, his legacy. I thought it was paranoia, but—" Holmes leaned forward, his eyes piercing. "Names, Lady Eleanor. Did he mention anyone specific?" She shook her head, tears welling. "Only Sir Rowland Vex. Father said he'd stop at nothing to ruin us." Holmes exchanged a glance with Watson. Vex's name was no surprise, but the ledger suggested a larger network. The talon and coin symbol gnawed at Holmes's mind a clue to the benefactor's identity, perhaps the true architect of Harrow's downfall. As they left Eleanor to her grief, Holmes led Watson to the falconry tower, its stone walls cold and silent. The pulley system he'd discovered earlier was undisturbed, but a new detail caught his eye. A faint scratch on the floor, forming a crude arrow pointing west. "Harrow left this," Holmes said, crouching to examine it. "A message, aura?" "Misdirection." Watson frowned. "West? That's toward the moors. Could he be hiding there? Or leading us there?" Holmes replied, standing. "Vex's men will be watching. We must move quickly." The moors stretched before them, vast and treacherous, the mist curling like specters over the heather. Holmes's mind raced, piecing together the ledger's names, the auction's chaos, and Harrow's desperate bid. The peregrine was more than a bird. It was a symbol, a key to a legacy that men like Vex would kill to control. As they ventured into the wilderness, the ledger's weight was a constant reminder. Every name, every transaction was a step closer to the truth or to danger. The day wore on, the sun climbing but offering little warmth. Holmes's keen eyes spotted tracks in the mud boots, too large to be Harrow's and fresh. "We're not alone," he murmured, his hand resting on the revolver in his pocket. Watson nodded, his own weapon at the ready. They followed the tracks to a copse of gnarled trees, where a small hut stood, its door ajar. Inside, they found signs of recent habitation, a half-eaten loaf of bread, a cloak much like Harrow's, and a single peregrine feather. Holmes's expression darkened. He was here, but not for long. Vex's men are closing in. As if on cue, a shout rang out from the moors. Shadows moved in the mystery, perhaps 4 figures, armed and purposeful. Holmes grabbed Watson's arm, pulling him behind a tree. "We can't fight them here," he whispered. "We need to draw them out, expose their numbers." Watson's heart pounded, but he trusted Holmes's instincts. They slipped through the copse, moving silently, the ledger still secure in the satchel. The pursuers were relentless, their footsteps heavy in the damp earth. Holmes led Watson to a rocky outcrop, where they took cover behind a boulder. "Holmes, what's the plan?" Watson hissed, peering into the mist. Holmes's eyes gleamed with calculation. "We use their momentum against them. They expect us to run, so we'll stand our ground briefly." He pulled a small vial from his coat, its contents glinting in the faint light. "A chemical distraction," he said, uncorking it. "Sulfur and charcoal, harmless but effective." He tossed the vial into the open, where it shattered, releasing a cloud of acrid smoke. The pursuers coughed and cursed, their advance faltering. "Now, Watson!" Holmes barked, sprinting toward a narrow path leading deeper into the moors. Watson followed, the ledger bouncing against his side. The smoke bought them moments, but the pursuers were already regrouping. They reached a shallow stream, its icy water soaking their boots. Holmes paused, scanning the horizon. "There," he said, pointing to a distant ridge. "A vantage point. If Harrow's hiding, he'll be there, watching." The climb was arduous, the mist thickening with every step. Watson's breath came in sharp gasps, but Holmes moved with relentless purpose, his mind fixed on the goal. At the ridge's crest, they found a small cave, its entrance hidden by brambles. Inside, a faint glow flickered, a lantern. "Harrow!" Holmes called softly, his voice echoing in the stone chamber. A figure stirred in the shadows, gaunt and weary. It was Lord Edmund Harrow, his face pale but his eyes burning with defiance. "Holmes!" he rasped, clutching a small cage where the peregrine perched, unharmed. "You've found me." Watson stepped forward, relief flooding him. "You're safe now. But why the charade? Why vanish?" Harrow's gaze dropped to the falcon. "To protect her. She's the last of her line, a bloodline Vex would destroy to claim supremacy. I staged my disappearance to draw him out, but I underestimated his reach." Holmes held up the ledger. "This tells a different story. Payments, Debts, your name is everywhere. Were you part of this smuggling ring? Harrow's eyes widened, then narrowed. Never willingly. Vex blackmailed me, forced me to fund his operations to protect my birds. I had no choice. Holmes's expression softened, but only slightly. You had choices, Harrow. Running was not the wisest. Come with us. We have the ledger, and Vex's men are close. As if to punctuate his words, a shout echoed from below. Vex's enforcers had found the cave. Holmes's mind raced, calculating their odds. 4 against 2, with Harrow weakened and the Peregrine a liability. But the cave offered an advantage: narrow entrances, defensible positions. Watson, the satchel, Holmes said, his voice calm but urgent. Guard the ledger. Harrow, stay behind us. Watson nodded, his revolver steady. Harrow clutched the falcon's cage, his face a mask of resolve. The first of Vex's men appeared at the cave's mouth, a hulking figure with a cudgel. Watson fired a warning shot, the sound deafening in the confined space. The man retreated, but others took his place, their shadows looming. Holmes moved. Like a specter, using the cave's walls to his advantage. He disarmed one man with a swift strike of his cane, then tripped another with a deft maneuver. Watson held his ground, firing sparingly to conserve ammunition. Harrow, despite his frailty, swung the cage like a weapon, startling a third attacker. The skirmish was brief but brutal. Holmes's precision and Watson's firepower drove the men back, their retreat marked by curses and the crunch of gravel. But Holmes knew this was only a reprieve. Vex's resources were vast, and the ledger's secrets were too dangerous to ignore. We must get you to safety, Holmes told Harrow, helping him to his feet. Verndale is compromised, but London offers refuge if we can reach it. Harrow nodded, his grip tightening on the cage. The Peregrine must be protected. She's more than a bird, she's my legacy. Watson slung the satchel over his shoulder, the ledger's weight a reminder of their mission. The mist had thickened, cloaking their descent from the ridge. Holmes led the way, his senses attuned to every sound, every shift in the air. Vex's men were out there, but so was the truth, and Holmes would not rest until it was laid bare. The trio moved through the moors. Shadows in the fog, the Peregrine's soft coos a strange counterpoint to the tension. The ledger held names, connections, a network of greed and betrayal. But it was Harrow's story, his fear, his sacrifice, that drove Holmes forward. The case of the disappearing Falconer was unraveling, thread by thread, and the next would lead them back to Verndale, where Vex's shadow loomed largest. Chapter 5. The Moorland Conspiracy. The mist hung low over Verndale Manor, a ghostly shroud that clung to the moors like a whispered secret. Sherlock Holmes stood at the edge of the estate, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon where the ledger's secrets had begun to unravel. The document, snatched from the chaos of the Dover auction, was a trove of cryptic entries, names, dates, and veiled references to a sacred lineage of falcons. It hinted at a conspiracy far deeper than a mere theft, one rooted in the ancient traditions of falconry. Holmes's mind churned, piecing together the fragments. Lord Edmund Harrow's disappearance, the stolen Peregrine, and now a secret society of falconers guarding a bloodline of birds so revered it sparked betrayal. Dr. John Watson, standing beside him, adjusted his scarf against the damp chill. Holmes, this ledger reads like a cipher wrapped in a riddle. Half these names are aliases, and the other half are falconers I've never heard of. What's this sacred lineage they're so obsessed with?" Holmes's lips twitched into a faint smile, his gaze still fixed on the moors. "Watson, the peregrine stolen from Harrow was no ordinary bird. It's a descendant of a lineage, prized for centuries, a symbol of power and prestige among a select few. This society, let us call them the Order of the Saffron Veil, for that emblem recurs in the ledger, has protected such birds since the days of the Plantagenets. Their secrecy is their strength, but also their vulnerability. Someone within their ranks seeks to destroy Harrow's legacy, and with it, the Order itself." Watson frowned, his practical mind grappling with the notion. A secret society for birds? It sounds like something out of a penny dreadful. "Yet it is real," Holmes replied, turning to face him, "and its enemies are equally real. The ledger points to a traitor, someone close to Harrow, orchestrating a plot to undermine the Order. We must return to Verndale's heart, the manor itself, and uncover the threads of this betrayal." The journey back to the manor was a silent one, the carriage rattling over uneven paths as the fog thickened. Watson's thoughts drifted to the auction, where Holmes, disguised as a flamboyant collector, had outwitted a room of eccentric bidders to secure the ledger. The memory of Harrow's fleeting appearance, bidding desperately for his stolen peregrine, lingered like a shadow. Why had Harrow staged his disappearance? And who within the Order could wield such malice? At Verndale Manor, the great hall was quiet, its oak-paneled walls and towering fireplace casting long shadows in the flickering lamplight. Lady Eleanor Harrow, the falconer's daughter, greeted them with a mixture of relief and anxiety. Her pale face, framed by dark curls, betrayed sleepless nights. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, have you found my father?" The servants whisper of curses and ghosts, and I fear for his life. Holmes's expression softened, though his eyes remained keen. "Lady Eleanor, your father is alive, but he treads a dangerous path. The ledger we recovered suggests he vanished to protect something greater than himself, a legacy tied to your family's falcons. Tell me, has anyone within the household acted strangely since his disappearance?" Eleanor hesitated, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. "Our steward, Mr. Grayson, has been distant. He's served my father for 20 years, but lately he avoids my questions and spends hours in the falconry tower. I thought it grief, but perhaps—" Holmes nodded, his mind already racing. Grayson, a name worth investigating. "Watson, let us inspect the tower once more. There may be clues we overlooked." The falconry tower loomed at the edge of the estate, a stone relic of medieval design, its narrow windows like watchful eyes. The air inside was heavy with the scent of straw and feathers, the mews lined with perches where Harrow's prized birds preened. Holmes moved with purpose, his lantern casting sharp beams across the walls. He paused at a wooden panel near the back, its grain slightly misaligned. With a deft press, the panel clicked, revealing a narrow compartment. "Watson, observe," Holmes said, extracting a small leather-bound book. Its pages were filled with meticulous drawings of falcons, their lineage traced through generations, alongside notes in Harrow's hand. "This confirms it. Harrow's peregrine is the last of a bloodline bred for unmatched speed and loyalty. To the Order, it is a living relic, worth killing for." Watson peered over his shoulder. "But who would kill for a bird? Vex, perhaps?" "Vex is a rival, not a mastermind," Holmes replied. His jealousy drives him, but the ledger suggests a subtler hand, someone within the order, manipulating Vex like a pawn. Grayson's behavior warrants scrutiny. Let us find him. They descended to the manor's kitchens, where Grayson, a wiry man with a perpetually furrowed brow, was overseeing the evening's preparations. His eyes darted nervously as Holmes approached, his questions sharp and unrelenting. Mr. Grayson, your loyalty to Lord Harrow is well known, yet you've been seen in the falconry tower at odd hours. Care to explain? Grayson's hands trembled, clutching a ledger of household accounts. I was merely ensuring the birds were fed, sir. Lord Harrow's absence has left them neglected. Holmes's gaze narrowed. A steward tending falcons? Curious. And what of the locked drawer in your quarters, containing letters addressed to a Sir R.V.? Shall I deduce their contents, or will you enlighten us? Grayson paled, his voice barely a whisper. You've been in my rooms? A necessary liberty, Holmes said coolly. The letters, Grayson, now. Cornered, Grayson slumped, his confession spilling forth. I wrote to Sir Rowland Vex, but only to report on Lord Harrow's falcons. He paid me to watch them, to note their health. I meant no harm. No harm? Watson interjected, his voice rising. Your master is missing, and you sell his secrets to his rival? Holmes raised a hand, silencing Watson. Grayson, you've been played as neatly as a violin. Vex is but a tool in a larger scheme. Tell me, did anyone else instruct you to report to him? Grayson shook his head, but his eyes flickered toward the moors beyond the window. Holmes followed his gaze, a spark of realization igniting. The moors, he murmured. The perfect stage for a traitor's work. Watson, prepare your revolver. We hunt tonight. Under the cover of darkness, Holmes and Watson ventured onto the moors, the fog curling around their ankles like a living thing. The ledger had mentioned a sanctuary, a hidden place where the Order's falcons were bred far from prying eyes. Holmes's deductions led them to a rocky outcrop where a faint light glimmered through the mist. As they approached, a figure cloaked in black emerged, moving with the stealth of a predator. Stay low, Watson, Holmes whispered, his voice taut. The figure paused, as if sensing their presence, then bolted toward a copse of gnarled trees. Holmes gave chase, his long legs eating up the distance, while Watson followed, his revolver at the ready. The pursuit was relentless, the moor's uneven terrain a maze of roots and stones. At last, they cornered the figure against a sheer cliff, its face obscured by a mask. Reveal yourself, Holmes demanded, his voice cutting through the night. The figure lunged, a blade glinting in the moonlight, but Holmes was faster, sidestepping and seizing the wrist. A brief struggle ended with the mask torn away, revealing a face Watson didn't recognize, a man with sharp features and a scar across his cheek. Who are you? Watson demanded, his revolver trained. The man spat, his voice venomous. You'll get nothing from me, Holmes. The Order's secrets die with me. Holmes's eyes gleamed. We shall see. He bound the man's hands with a length of cord from his pocket, but before he could question further, a rustle in the underbrush signaled another presence. The man twisted free, vanishing into the fog as a second figure, a shadow in the distance, fired. A warning shot that echoed across the moors. Watson cursed, lowering his weapon. He's gone, Holmes. Who was he? Holmes knelt, retrieving a small object from the ground, a golden emblem shaped like a falcon's talon, etched with the initials OSV. "The Order of the Saffron Veil," he said grimly. "Our masked friend is no mere lackey. He's a guardian of their secrets, and he's not alone." They returned to the manor at dawn, the emblem clutched in Holmes's hand. Helena awaited them, her eyes wide with hope. "Did you find him, my father?" "Not yet," Holmes admitted, "but we are closer. The moor holds the key as sanctuary where your father's falcons are protected. The traitor seeks to destroy it, and we must act swiftly." Watson, exhausted but resolute, added, "We'll find him, Lady Eleanor. Holmes never fails." Holmes's gaze drifted to the emblem, its intricate design a puzzle yet to be solved. "The game is afoot, Watson. Tomorrow we search the moors." Again, the sanctuary awaits, and with it, the truth. The night passed in restless anticipation, the manor's silence broken only by the distant cry of a falcon. Holmes sat by the fire, the ledger open before him, tracing connections between names and places. The Order's sanctuary was no myth, it was a physical place, hidden in the wilds of the moor where the peregrine's lineage was preserved. But who was the traitor, and why target Harrow? The emblem suggested a high-ranking member, someone with access to the Order's deepest secrets. At first light, Holmes and Watson set out, guided by a crude map sketched in the ledger. The moors stretched endlessly, their beauty masking danger. Bogs lurked beneath the heather, and the wind carried whispers of betrayal. Holmes's keen senses picked up subtle signs, a broken twig, a scuff in the earth, leading them to a concealed path winding toward a rocky gorge. "There," Holmes said, pointing to a narrow cleft in the stone. "The sanctuary." The entrance was guarded by nature itself, vines and moss obscuring a wooden door carved with the Order's emblem. Inside, the air was cool, the scent of feathers and earth mingling. Cages lined the walls, housing falcons of breathtaking beauty, their eyes sharp and unyielding. At the center stood a pedestal, its surface etched with the lineage of the peregrine stolen from Harrow. Watson marveled. His voice hushed. "This is incredible, Holmes. A hidden aviary, guarded for centuries." "And worth killing for," Holmes replied, his fingers brushing a note pinned to the pedestal. It was in Harrow's hand, a warning. "The traitor is within. Trust no." 1. A creak echoed behind them, and Holmes spun, his cane raised like a weapon. A figure stepped from the shadows, not the masked man from the moors, but a woman, her face lined with age and resolve. She wore the Order's emblem on a chain around her neck. "Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice steady, "you found our sanctuary, but you're not welcome here." Watson's hand went to his revolver, but Holmes signaled restraint. "Madam, I seek only the truth. Lord Harrow is in danger, and your order is compromised. Who is the traitor?" The woman's eyes narrowed. "You think I'd betray my own? The Order has survived wars and kings. We protect the falcons, not for profit, but for honor. Harrow's disappearance was his choice to draw out the snake among us." "Then help us find him," Watson urged. "He's your leader, isn't he?" She hesitated, then nodded. I am Lady Margaret, keeper of the sanctuary. Harrow left to lure the traitor into the open, but he underestimated their reach. The masked man you chased, he's one of Vex's lieutenants, but the true traitor is higher still. A name in your ledger, Corvus. Holmes's mind raced, recalling the ledger's cryptic entries. Corvus, Latin for raven, a bird of ill omen. An alias, no doubt, but one we can trace. Lady Margaret, where is Harrow now? She shook her head. He moves like a ghost, hiding in London shadows. But the moors are watched. If you seek him, beware Corvus knows you're here. The warning hung heavy as they left the sanctuary, the door sealing behind them. The moors seemed darker now, the fog a cloak for unseen eyes. Holmes's stride was purposeful, his mind a storm of deductions. Watson, we return to London. Harrow is there, and so is Corvus. The emblem we found will lead us to them. The journey back was fraught with tension, the carriage wheels creaking as if echoing the weight of the mystery. Watson clutched the emblem, its golden surface catching the faint light. Holmes, this order they're fanatics, risking lives for birds? Not for birds, Watson, Holmes corrected. For what they represent. Power, legacy, control. The peregrine is a symbol, and symbols inspire devotion and betrayal. In London, the city's pulse was a stark contrast to the moors' silence. Holmes led them to a discreet office in Whitehall, where a contact in the Home Office, Mr. Mycroft. Holmes awaited. Mycroft, Sherlock's elder brother, was a man of immense intellect and subtle influence, his office a hub of secrets. He examined the emblem, his expression unreadable. "Sherlock, you've stumbled into a nest of vipers," Mycroft said, his voice low. "The Order of the Saffron Veil is no mere club of bird enthusiasts. Their falcons have been gifts to kings, tokens of alliances. Their enemies are not just rivals, but foreign powers seeking to disrupt those bonds. This Corvus, likely a code name for someone with ties to the continent." Holmes nodded. "Then we must find Harrow before Corvus does. The ledger lists a meeting place, a warehouse in Wapping, tomorrow night. If Harrow is hiding, he'll be there." Mycroft's eyes flickered with concern. "Be cautious, brother. The Order's reach is long, and their secrets are guarded with blood." The warehouse in Wapping was a hulking relic of the docks, its timbers groaning under the weight of years. Holmes and Watson arrived under cover of darkness, disguised as dock workers. The air was thick with the stench of tar and fish, the rivers lapping a constant murmur. Inside, shadows danced across crates stacked high, and voices echoed from a hidden corner. Holmes signaled silence, creeping forward. Through a gap in the crates, they saw a group of men, their faces obscured by hoods, gathered around a crate, bearing the Order's emblem. One voice, sharp and commanding, stood out. "Harrow thinks he can hide, but Corvus sees all. The peregrine will be ours, and with it, the Order's power." Watson's breath caught, but Holmes's hand steadied him. They listened as the men discussed a plan to ambush Harrow at dawn, their words laced with menace. The leader Corvus perhaps mentioned a foreign benefactor, a name Holmes recognized from the ledger, Baron von Stahl, a Prussian with a penchant for rare creatures. As the meeting dispersed, Holmes and Watson slipped away, their minds racing. Von Stahl, Holmes mused. A collector of power, not just birds. If he's funding Corvus, this is no mere falconry feud. It's a game of international stakes. Dawn broke over London, gray and unforgiving. Holmes's plan was simple: intercept Harrow before the ambush. The ledger had hinted at a safe house near the docks, a derelict tavern known as the Black Talon. They arrived to find it deserted, save for a single candle burning in the window a signal. Inside, Harrow sat slumped in a chair, his face gaunt. but his eyes fierce. The peregrine perched nearby, its talons gripping a makeshift stand. "Holmes," Harrow rasped, "you've found me, but you're too late. Corvus knows I'm here." "Then we move now," Holmes replied, his voice steady. "Who is Corvus?" Harrow's gaze darkened. "A shadow in the Order, someone I trusted. They want the peregrine's lineage destroyed, to weaken us before von Stahl's allies. I faked my disappearance to draw them out, but I misjudged their ruthlessness." A crash at the door cut him short. Vex's men, led by the masked figure from the moors, stormed in. Watson fired a warning shot, scattering them, while Holmes seized Harrow and the peregrine, leading them through a back exit. The chase spilled onto the docks, a labyrinth of crates and ropes. Holmes's quick thinking, toppling a stack of barrels, slowed their pursuers, but the masked man was relentless, his blade flashing. "Watson, the river!" Holmes shouted. They reached a small boat, shoving off as arrows thudded into the wood. The peregrine screeched, its wings beating as if urging them on. In the chaos, Holmes spotted the masked man's cloak catch on a crate, revealing the same scar from the moors. "Corvus," he muttered, committing the face to memory. They reached safety at a safe house in Limehouse, Harrow trembling but alive. The peregrine, unharmed, preened on his arm. "You've saved us," Harrow said, his voice thick. "But Corvus is still out there." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Not for long. The emblem, the ledger, the sanctuary all point to a final reckoning. We return to Verndale, Harrow. The Order must face its traitor." The journey back to the moors was a race against time, the threat of Corvus looming. At Verndale, Holmes gathered the Order's members, Lady Margaret among them, in the great hall. The emblem lay on the table, its golden surface accusing. "One among you is Corvus," Holmes declared, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "A traitor who sold Harrow's secrets to a foreign power. Step forward, or I shall name you." Silence fell, heavy as the fog outside. Then a man stood, Lord Percival Drake, a falconer of quiet renown, his face pale. "It was me," he admitted, his voice breaking. "Von Stahl promised wealth, power. I didn't mean for it to go this far." The Order erupted in outrage, but Holmes silenced them. "Drake, you've endangered a legacy centuries old, but your confession spares you a worse fate. The authorities will deal with you." As Drake was led away, Harrow clasped Holmes's hand. "You've saved more than my life, Mr. Holmes. You've saved the Order." The peregrine, perched nearby, let out a cry as if in agreement. Watson smiled, his notebook already filling with the tale. "A fine case, Holmes. Though I'll never look at a bird the same way again." Holmes's gaze drifted to the moors, where the fog was lifting. "The game is never truly over, Watson. But for now, the falcon flies free." Chapter 6. The Traitor's Talon. The fog clung to London streets like a conspirator's cloak, wrapping the gaslit alleys in a shroud of secrecy. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson moved swiftly through the damp, cobblestoned lanes of Whitechapel, their footsteps muffled by the mist. The revelations at Dover had set a fire under Holmes, his mind a whirlwind of deductions, each clue a thread in the intricate tapestry of Lord Edmund Harrow's disappearance. The ledger from the auction, now tucked securely in Holmes's greatcoat, had confirmed a web of deceit spun around the Falconer's world, but it was the steward's name, Malcolm Grieve, that burned brightest in his thoughts. Grieve, Harrow's trusted confidant, had been implicated in the cipher's whispers, a potential traitor lurking within Verndale Manor's walls. Holmes's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned every shadow. "Watson, we are not merely hunting a man," he said, his voice low and precise. "We are pursuing a motive. Greaves' role in this affair is no accident. The ledger suggests he's been feeding information to Sir Roland Vex, but to what end? Betrayal is a currency, and we must discover what Grieve has bought with it." Watson, his revolver a reassuring weight in his pocket, nodded. "If Grieve is Vex's spy, he's played a dangerous game. Harrow trusted him implicitly. Why risk such a position?" "Precisely, Watson," Holmes replied, pausing at a corner where a flickering lamp cast eerie shapes on the brickwork. "The why is the heart of it. Greed, fear, or vengeance, each leaves a distinct footprint. We shall find Grieve's tracks tonight." Their destination was a modest lodging house near Spitalfields, where Holmes's inquiries had traced Grieve after the steward's abrupt departure from Verndale. The building loomed ahead, its sagging roof and grimy windows betraying years of neglect. Holmes's informants, street urchins and cabbies who formed his invisible network, had confirmed Grieve's presence here, hiding like a fox gone to ground. The hour was late, past midnight, and the streets were nearly deserted save for the occasional drunkard or night watchman inside. The lodging-house reeked of stale tobacco and damp wood. The landlady, a wiry woman with suspicious eyes, confirmed Grieve's room on the 3rd floor after Holmes slipped her a shilling. The stairs creaked underfoot as they ascended, Watson's hand resting on his revolver. Holmes, ever alert, moved. With the grace of a panther, his senses attuned to the slightest disturbance dotted Grieve's door. Holmes pressed an ear to the wood, listening. A faint rustle, like paper being folded, reached him. He glanced at Watson, signaling silence, then rapped sharply. The rustling stopped. "Mr. Grieve," Holmes called, his tone deceptively genial. "A word, if you please." No response. Holmes tried the handle lock. With a deft movement, he produced a thin metal tool from his pocket and worked the lock, the tumblers yielding with a soft click. The door swung open to reveal a cramped room lit by a single candle. Malcolm Grieve stood frozen, a satchel half-packed on the bed, his face pale as the fog outside. "Going somewhere, Mr. Grieve?" Holmes asked, stepping inside. Watson followed, closing the door behind them. Grieve's eyes darted between the two men, his hands trembling. He was a lean man in his 40s, with a pinched face and thinning hair, his once impeccable steward's attire now rumpled. "Mr. Holmes," he stammered. I didn't expect. No, I dare say you didn't." Holmes interrupted, his gaze sweeping the room. Papers were scattered on a small table, a map of London marked with red ink, and a letter half burned in the grate caught his eye. "Yet here we are. Sit, Mr. Grieve. We have much to discuss." Grieve hesitated, then sank onto a chair, his shoulders slumping. Watson stood by the door, his presence a quiet warning. Holmes picked up the charred letter, his fingers brushing the singed edges. "A hasty attempt at destruction," he mused. "But not hasty enough." He held the fragment to the candlelight, deciphering the looping script. "A missive from Sir Roland Vex. How curious. Care to explain, Mr. Grieve?" The steward's jaw tightened, but his voice held a note of defiance. "I've done nothing wrong. I'm a servant, not a conspirator." Holmes's smile was thin. "A servant who corresponds with a known rival of his master, who flees Verndale under cover of night, who burns evidence of his dealings. Come, sir, you insult my intelligence." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "You've been spying for Vex. The ledger from Dover confirms it. Names, dates, shipments of rare birds all traced back to you. What I require now is the why." Greaves. Defiance crumbled, his hands gripping the chair's arms. "It wasn't betrayal," he whispered. "It was survival. Vex, he had me in his grip. Debts, Mr. Holmes. Debts I couldn't pay. He promised to clear them if I kept him informed about Lord Harrow's falcons." Watson frowned, his compassion stirred despite the confession. "Debts? What sort of debts could drive you to betray a man like Harrow?" Greaves' eyes glistened. "Gambling. A weakness I couldn't shake. Vex's men cornered me months ago, offered a way out. I only passed on small things, Harrow's breeding plans, the Peregrine's lineage. I never meant for him to disappear." Holmes's expression remained unyielding. "Yet disappear he did. And your information fueled Vex's schemes. Did you know of the smuggling ring, the auction in Dover?" Greaves shook his head vehemently. "No. I swear, I knew nothing of auctions or smuggling. I only told Vex what he asked for. When Harrow vanished, I panicked. Thought Vex had gone too far, that I'd be blamed. That's why I ran." Holmes paced the room, his mind racing. Greaves' story rang true. Fear and desperation were potent motivators, but it didn't absolve him. Nor did it explain Harrow's staged disappearance. The Falconer's cryptic note, found in Chapter 1, had hinted at a deliberate act, a plan to draw out a traitor. If Greaves wasn't the architect, then Harrow's true purpose remained hidden. "Watson," Holmes said, "search the satchel. Let us see what else Mr. Greaves intended to take with him." Watson rifled through the bag, pulling out clothes, a pocket knife, and a small leather-bound book. He handed the book to Holmes, who flipped it open. The pages were filled with meticulous notes in Harrow's hand sketches of falcons, breeding, charts, and, tucked between the pages, a folded sheet with a single line: "The talent strikes from within." Trust no one. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Harrow's journal. "You took this from his study, didn't you, Greaves?" The steward nodded, his voice barely audible. "I found it the night he vanished. Thought it might protect me, prove I wasn't involved in whatever he was planning." Holmes read the line again, his mind piecing together the puzzle. Harrow suspected betrayal long before he disappeared. This journal, this note, they're part of his design. He staged his vanishing to flush out the traitor, to force your hand, Greaves. But you're not the mastermind. Vex is the puppeteer, and you're merely a string he pulled. Greaves buried his face in his hands. "I never wanted this. If Harrow's alive, tell me where he is. I'll confess everything to him, beg his forgiveness." Holmes exchanged a glance with Watson. The steward's remorse seemed genuine, but the case was far from closed. Harrow was alive, Holmes's instinct screamed it, and hiding somewhere in London's labyrinth, guarding his precious Peregrine and his secrets. The journal's cryptic warning suggested a deeper game, one where Harrow played both hunter and prey. "We need more, Greaves," Holmes said. "Names, places. Where does Vex operate in London? Where might Harrow hide?" Greaves hesitated, then spoke in a rush. "Vex has a warehouse in Limehouse near the docks. He keeps his birds there, the ones he doesn't sell at auctions. If Harrow's hiding, it'd be somewhere he could protect his falcon, somewhere secluded, with space for a bird to fly. Holmes nodded, his mind already mapping Limehouse's warren of streets. Very well. Watson, we're done here for now. Mr. Grieve, you'll remain in London under watch. Attempt to flee again, and I'll ensure the Yard takes an interest in your debts. Grieve nodded mutely, his spirit broken. Holmes and Watson left the lodging-house, stepping back into the fog. The air was thick, the city's pulse a distant hum. Watson glanced at his friend, noting the intensity in Holmes's eyes. "Do you believe him, Holmes, about not knowing Harrow's plan?" "I believe he's a pawn, Watson," Holmes replied, lighting a cigarette as they walked. "But pawns can still topple kings if moved correctly. Harrow's journal confirms he orchestrated his disappearance, likely to expose Vex's network. The peregrine is the key, his obsession, his legacy. He's protecting it, and we must find him before Vex does." The trail led to Limehouse, a district of narrow alleys and looming warehouses, where the Thames's stench mingled with coal smoke. By dawn, they reached a dilapidated building marked with a faded sign, Vex and Sons, Imports. The warehouse was quiet, its windows dark, but Holmes's keen senses detected a faint sound, a falcon's cry. Sharp and unmistakable. "Watson," Holmes whispered, "we're close." "That cry is no ordinary bird. It's Harrow's peregrine." They circled the warehouse, finding a side door ajar. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of feathers and straw. Cages lined the walls, filled with exotic birds, parrots, hawks, a macaw that squawked at their approach. In the center, a makeshift aviary held a single peregrine falcon, its eyes fierce, its talons gripping the perch. Beside it, slumped in a chair, was Lord Edmund Harrow. He was gaunt, his clothes tattered, but his gaze was defiant. "Holmes," he rasped, rising unsteadily, "I knew you'd come." Watson rushed to his side, checking his pulse. "You're alive, thank God, but you're weak. What happened?" Harrow's voice was hoarse but steady. "I had to vanish, Doctor. Vex was closing in, threatening my birds, my society. I staged it all the tower, the feather to draw him out. I've been hiding here, guarding her." He gestured to the peregrine. "She's the last of her line, the purest blood." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Your journal, the note." "You suspected Grieve." Harrow nodded. "I suspected someone. Grieve was too close, too trusted. I fed him false leads, watched him run to Vex. But Vex is clever. He's been one step ahead, using my own steward against me." Before Holmes could respond, a creak echoed from the warehouse's rear. Shadows moved, and 3 figures emerged, Vex's. "Thugs, armed with clubs. Well, well," one growled. "The Falconer and his detective. Vex'll pay well for this." Holmes's hand shot to his pocket, producing a small whistle. He blew a sharp note, and from the rafters a flurry of wings erupted. The peregrine, freed by Harrow's quick hand, dove at the thugs, talons flashing. Chaos ensued as the men flailed, cursing, while Holmes and Watson seized the moment. Holmes tripped one thug, sending him crashing into a cage, while Watson's revolver dissuaded another. The third fled into the dawn, leaving his comrades behind. Harrow clutched the peregrine, now perched on his arm. "She saved me before," he said, a faint smile breaking through his exhaustion. "Thank you." Holmes. Holmes waved off the gratitude. "We're not done, Lord Harrow. Vex is still at large, and your society remains at risk. But you're safe for now." They escorted Harrow to a nearby inn, where Watson tended to his minor injuries. The peregrine, secured in a travel cage, watched with unblinking eyes. Holmes pored over the journal, its pages a map of Harrow's, mind-breeding charts, society members, and a list of Vex's known allies. One name stood out, a foreign noble mentioned in passing, whose influence loomed over the smuggling ring. "Watson," Holmes said, closing the journal, "we've unmasked one traitor, but the game isn't over. Vex's reach extends beyond London, and this noble may be the true puppet master. We must return to Verndale, draw Vex into the open." Watson nodded, his resolve firm. "And Harrow?" "He's in no state to fight." "He won't need to," Holmes replied. "He's played his part. Now we play ours." The trio departed Limehouse as the city awoke, the fog lifting to reveal a pale sunrise. Holmes's mind was already racing ahead, plotting the next move in this deadly game of falcons and traitors. Harrow's safety was secured, but Vex's shadow lingered, and the peregrine's fierce cry echoed in Holmes's thoughts, a reminder that the hunt was far from over. Chapter 7. The Falconer's Refuge. The London night was a shroud of fog and shadow, the kind that clung to the cobblestones and muffled the clatter of hooves and wheels. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson moved swiftly through the narrow alleys of Jeing, the East End, their breaths visible in the damp air. The revelation from the steward had set their course. Lord Edmund Harrow, the missing falconer, was alive, hiding in the city's underbelly, guarding his prized peregrine from the clutches of Sir Rowland Vex. The urgency of the chase pulsed through Watson's veins, though Holmes, as ever, seemed carved from ice, his sharp eyes scanning every doorway and darkened corner. The trail had led them to a decrepit warehouse district near the Thames, where the air reeked of tar and rotting fish. The steward's confession had been precise. Harrow was holed up in a crumbling storage house, one of many owned by a shell company tied to the Falconer Society. Holmes had deduced the exact location from a scrap of paper found in the steward's pocket, a receipt for coal delivered to a dockside address. Now, as they approached the looming structure, its broken windows glinting faintly under the gaslights, Watson felt the weight of the revolver in his coat pocket. He trusted Holmes's intellect, but the East End was no place for unarmed optimism. Holmes raised a hand, signaling a pause. They stood in the shadow of a rusted iron gate, the warehouse just beyond. "Observe, Watson," he whispered, pointing to a faint glow seeping from a high window. "A lantern, but shielded. Harrow is cautious, yet not invisible. We must approach with care. Vex's men may be closer than we think." Watson nodded, his heart thudding. "Do you think Harrow knows we're coming?" Holmes's lips twitched. In a faint smile, "He knows someone is coming. Whether he trusts us is another matter. Stay close and keep your wits about you." They slipped through the gate, the hinges creaking faintly despite their care. The warehouse loomed like a forgotten giant, its brick walls stained with soot and time. Holmes led the way to a side entrance, a heavy door half rotted at the base. He tested the handle, found it locked, and produced a thin metal pick from his coat. In moments, the lock clicked open, and they stepped into the cavernous interior. Air inside was thick with dust, the faint scent of feathers and straw cutting through the mustiness. Crates were stacked haphazardly, their contents spilling old ropes, rusted tools, and sacks of grain long gone to mold. A narrow wooden staircase led to a loft above, where the lantern's glow was strongest. Holmes moved like a cat, silent and deliberate, while Watson followed, his boots scuffing softly on the grimy floor dot at the base of the stairs. Holmes paused again, his head tilted. A faint sound, almost imperceptible, drifted from above, a soft, rhythmic tapping, like a finger against wood. "Harrow," Holmes murmured. "He's signaling his bird." A falconer's habit, to calm the creature. They ascended the stairs, each step creaking under their weight. The loft was a cluttered space, lit by a single lantern hanging from a beam. In its dim light, Watson saw him, Lord Edmund Harrow, gaunt and unshaven, his once fine clothes tattered. He sat on a crate, his peregrine perched on a makeshift stand beside him, its sharp eyes glinting. Harrow's hand froze mid-tap as he saw them, his face a mask of wariness. "Holmes," Harrow said, his voice hoarse but steady, "I should have known you'd find me." Holmes stepped forward, his hands open to show no threat. "Lord Harrow, your disappearance has caused quite the stir, but I suspect you intended it so. Why hide here with your falcon when Verndale awaits your return?" Harrow's eyes darted to the peregrine, then back to Holmes. "Vex, he's not just after my bird, Holmes. He wants to destroy everything, the society, our legacy, the bloodline we've protected for centuries. I faked my vanishing to draw him out, to see who in the society would betray me, but I underestimated his reach." Watson, standing near the stairs, felt a prickle of unease. The warehouse was too quiet, the shadows too deep. "Holmes, we should, the—" Words died in his throat as a crash echoed from below. The door they'd entered through slammed open, and heavy boots thudded against the floor. Holmes's eyes narrowed, and he gestured for Watson to take cover behind a stack of crates. Harrow scooped up his peregrine, securing it in a leather. "Who'd," and crouched low. "Vex's men," Holmes whispered. "They've been watching this place. Stay sharp, Watson." The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by low voices, 3, perhaps 4 men. Watson peered through a gap in the crates, catching glimpses of rough figures in dark coats, their faces obscured by caps. One carried a lantern, its light casting jagged shadows. Another held a cudgel, tapping it against his palm. "Spread out," one of them growled. "He's up there with that damned bird. Vex wants him alive, but he don't care about the state. He's in." Holmes's mind was already at work, his eyes scanning the loft. He pointed to a coil of rope near Harrow. "Lord Harrow, can you climb?" Harrow nodded, his jaw tight. "I've scaled cliffs for falcons. This is no different." "Good. Watson, the lantern, dim it, but don't extinguish it. We need a distraction." Watson crept to the lantern, turning its wick low until the loft was nearly dark. Holmes, meanwhile, untied the rope and looped it around a beam, creating a makeshift pulley. He handed the end to Harrow. "Up and over the rafters. Take your bird and stay out of sight, Watson, and I will handle this." Harrow hesitated, then nodded, securing the peregrine to his wrist and climbing with surprising agility. The rope creaked as he vanished into the shadows above. Watson gripped his revolver, his pulse racing as the footsteps reached the stairs. Holmes moved to the edge of the loft, his silhouette barely visible. He picked up a loose board and tossed it across the room, where it clattered against a crate. The footsteps paused, then shifted direction, the men below cursing as they fanned out. "To investigate. Now, Watson," Holmes hissed. Watson fired a single shot into the air, the sound deafening in the confined space. The men below shouted, their lanterns swinging wildly as they ducked for cover. Holmes seized the moment, grabbing a sack of grain and hurling it down the stairs. It burst on impact, sending a cloud of dust and chaff into the air, choking the intruders. "Move!" Holmes barked, pulling Watson toward a narrow window at the far end of the loft. They clambered through, dropping onto a slanted roof outside. The night air was cold, the fog thicker now, cloaking them as they slid to the ground. Harrow was already there, his peregrine still hooded, his face pale but resolute. "They'll regroup," Holmes said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "We need to get you to safety, Lord Harrow. Verndale is too exposed, but I know a place, a safe house near Baker Street. Can you make it?" Harrow nodded, clutching his bird. "For her, I can." They moved quickly, weaving through the alleys, the sounds of pursuit fading behind them. Watson's mind raced, piecing together the stakes. Vex's obsession with Harrow's peregrine wasn't just about rivalry, it was about control, about dismantling a society that had guarded its secrets for generations. The peregrine, with its ancient bloodline, was a symbol, a key to that legacy. And Vex, it seemed, would stop at nothing to claim it. The safe house was a nondescript flat above a bakery. Its windows shuttered and its door reinforced. Holmes unlocked it with a key hidden in his coat, ushering Harrow and Watson inside. The room was sparse but warm, a single table and chairs in the center, a cot in the corner. Harrow set his peregrine on the table, removing its hood. The bird shook its feathers, its eyes locking onto Holmes as if assessing him. "She's magnificent," Watson said, unable to help himself. The peregrine's sleek form, its sharp beak and talons, spoke of a creature born for the sky. Harrow's face softened. "She's more than that, Doctor. She's the last of her line, bred from falcons that flew for kings. Vex wants her to break us, to prove he's the better man. But it's not about the bird, it's about power." Holmes sat across from Harrow, his fingers steepled. "Tell me everything, Lord Harrow." "The society, Vex's plan, the traitor leave nothing out." "If we're to end this, I need the full picture." Harrow took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly. "The society, the Order of the Saffron Veil, has existed for centuries. We protect the bloodlines of rare birds, falcons especially. They're not just animals. They're symbols of freedom, of mastery over the wild. My peregrine, Etched, is the last of a lineage traced back to the Normans. Vex joined us years ago, but his ambition poisoned him. He wanted to control the Order, to sell our secrets to foreign collectors. When I refused, he stole Etched, thinking it would force my hand. Watson frowned. "But you got her back." "At the auction in Dover." Harrow nodded. "I did, but at a cost." Vex had already infiltrated the society. Someone betrayed me, someone. Close. I staged my disappearance to flush them out, to see who would act in my absence. The steward was part of it, but he's not the mastermind. Vex has someone higher, someone with access to our innermost counsels. Holmes's eyes gleamed. "And you suspect who?" Harrow hesitated. "Lady Margaret Crane, my cousin. She's always resented my position as head of the Order." She's cunning, Holmes, and she's been too quiet since I vanished. Holmes leaned back, his mind clearly racing. Interesting. But we'll deal with Lady Crane in time. For now, we must protect you and Etheria. Vex's men will come again. They know you're alive, and they know you're a threat. As if on cue, a sharp knock sounded at the door. Watson's hand went to his revolver, but Holmes raised a hand, his expression unperturbed. He crossed to the door, peered through a small peephole, and opened it to reveal Mrs. Hudson, her face pale but composed. "Mr. Holmes, there's men outside," she whispered. "Rough types lurking in the alley." "I saw them from the bakery." Holmes nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Hudson. Lock the shop and stay upstairs. We'll handle this." She retreated, and Holmes turned to Watson and Harrow. "It seems Vex is impatient. Watson, check the back window. Harrow, secure your bird." Watson moved to the rear of the flat, peering through the shutters. The alley below was dark, but he caught the glint of a knife in the moonlight. 3 of them, Holmes, armed. Holmes's smile was almost predatory. Good. A smaller force means they're stretched thin. We can use that. He rummaged through a trunk in the corner, pulling out a small crate of odds and ends flares, a coil of wire, and a peculiar device that looked like a cross between a whistle and a bellows. "Watson, help me with this. Harrow, stay low." Working quickly, Holmes rigged the wire across the door frame, attaching it to the bellows device. "A crude alarm," he explained. "If they breach the door, this will release a cloud of chalk. Dust, not lethal, but it'll blind them long enough for us to act." Watson marveled at Holmes's ingenuity, though he was used to it by now. "And the flares?" "For the finale," Holmes said, tucking 2 into his coat. "Now, positions. Watson, by the window. Harrow, behind the table. If they come, we'll give them a welcome they won't forget." The minutes stretched, the silence heavy. Then a creak at the door, followed by a muffled curse. The wire snapped, and a puff of white dust exploded into the room, followed by shouts of confusion. Watson fired a warning shot through the window, the crack echoing as the men outside scattered. Holmes lit a flare, its red glow illuminating the alley, revealing 3 figures stumbling through the dust cloud, out the back. Holmes ordered, grabbing Harrow and pushing him toward the rear exit. Watson followed, his revolver still drawn. They burst into the alley, the fog swallowing them as they ran. Behind, the thugs recovered, their shouts growing closer. Holmes led them through a maze of back streets, doubling back twice to throw off pursuit. Harrow clutched Etheria, the bird eerily calm despite the chaos. They reached a small courtyard, its walls high and defensible. Holmes stopped, his breath steady despite the sprint. "Here," he said, handing Watson the second flare. "Light it if they get close. It'll draw attention. Vex's men won't want witnesses." Watson nodded, his fingers tightening around the flare. Harrow, panting, set Etheria on a low wall, checking her hood. "She's unharmed," he said, relief in his voice. Holmes scanned the courtyard. "We've bought time, but not much." "Vex. We'll send more men, and we can't keep running. We need to end this, Lord Harrow. Tell me, where is the Society's sanctuary?" "The place you'd go if all else failed." Harrow hesitated, then spoke. "Cornwall. A hidden aviary in the cliffs, known only to the Order's elders. It's where we keep the last of the bloodlines. If I can get Etheria there, She'll be safe, Holmes nodded. Then that's our destination. But first, we deal with Vex. He's overplayed his hand tonight, and that's our advantage. The sound of boots echoed nearby, and Watson lit the flare, its blaze cutting through the fog. Shouts followed, then the sound of running away, not toward them. The flare had worked, drawing the eyes of late-night passers-by. Vex's men, it seemed, preferred the shadows. Holmes clapped Watson on the shoulder. Well done, old friend. Now, let's get Lord Harrow to safety. Cornwall awaits, and with it, the end of this game. They moved off into the night, the peregrines. Soft coo, a strange counterpoint to the danger behind them. Watson felt a surge of pride, not just in Holmes's brilliance, but in their shared resolve. Harrow was safe, Etheria was secure, and Vex's plans were unraveling. The case was far from over, but for now, they had won this round. The journey to the safe house had been a gauntlet, but it had forged a bond between them, Holmes, Watson, Harrow, and the fierce, silent peregrine. As they slipped through the fog, Watson couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was yet to come, that Vex's shadow still loomed larger than they knew. But with Holmes leading the way, he felt ready for whatever lay ahead. The safe house was quiet when they returned, Mrs. Hudson's worried face greeting them at the door. She ushered them inside, offering tea and blankets, which Harrow accepted gratefully. Etheria was placed on a makeshift perch, her presence a reminder of the stakes. Holmes stood by the window, his silhouette sharp against the dawn creeping. Through the shutters, we rest here until morning, he said. Then we move for Cornwall. Vex will anticipate it, but he won't expect us to strike back. We'll use his arrogance against him. Watson nodded, settling into a chair, his revolver still close. Harrow, exhausted but unbroken, looked at Holmes with something like awe. You've saved me, Mr. Holmes, and her. I won't forget it. Holmes waved a hand dismissively. Save your thanks, Lord Harrow. The case isn't closed. But rest. Assured, I intend to see it through. As the first light of dawn broke over London, Watson felt a quiet resolve settle over him. The Falconer's refuge was a temporary haven, but the path to Cornwall and the final confrontation with Vex lay ahead. For now, they had survived, and that was enough. Chapter 8. The duel of wits. The dawn broke over Verndale Manor with a sky bruised in shades of violet and gold, casting long shadows across the dew-soaked lawns. Sherlock Holmes stood at the edge of the estate's falconry grounds, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon where the moors met the heavens. The air carried the crisp bite of autumn, and the faint cries of falcons wheeled above, their wings slicing through the morning mist. Dr. John Watson, ever the faithful companion, stood beside him, his notebook tucked under his arm, ready to record the day's events. The stage was set for Holmes's final gambit, a meticulously planned falconry contest designed to ensnare Sir Roland Vex and expose his treachery before the eyes of the secretive Falconer's conclave. Holmes's plan was as intricate as the gears of a Swiss watch. He had spent the previous night weaving together the threads of evidence, the ledger from the Dover auction, the steward's confession, and Lord Edmund Harrow's own account of the plot against him. Vex, the cunning rival Falconer, had orchestrated a campaign to discredit Harrow and seize control of the conclave, a centuries-old society dedicated to preserving an ancient bloodline of peregrine falcons. The contest, announced as a celebration of Harrow's return, would draw Vex into the open. His arrogance a snare Holmes intended to exploit. The manor's grounds buzzed with activity as members of the conclave arrived, their cloaks emblazoned with the silver talon emblem of their order. Carriages rolled up the gravel drive, disgorging men and women of varied countenance, some grizzled falconers from the Scottish Highlands, others elegant aristocrats with a passion for the sport. Each carried a bird of prey, hooded and perched on gloved fists, their talons clicking softly against leather. The atmosphere was one of restrained excitement, tempered by the whispers of Harrow's mysterious disappearance and sudden reappearance. Holmes, dressed in a tailored tweed suit that blended with the rustic setting, moved among the guests with the ease of a man accustomed to every social sphere. His hawk-like gaze missed nothing, the nervous tick of a young falconer's jaw, the furtive glance exchanged between two conclave elders, the way Vex's man, a burly fellow named Grimsby, lingered near the falconry cages. Watson, less adept at concealment, followed closely, his honest face betraying a mix of anticipation and unease. "Holmes," Watson murmured, leaning close as they passed a table laden with crystal decanters and silver trays. "Are you certain Vex will take the fake? Will take the simba? Bait? He's a slippery devil, and we've only one chance to catch him." Holmes's lips curved into a faint smile, his eyes glinting with the thrill of the chase. "Vex's arrogance is his Achilles heel, Watson. He cannot resist the opportunity to parade his superiority before the conclave. I have ensured the contest's rules play to his vanity and his greed." The contest was to be a test of skill and cunning, with each falconer releasing their bird to hunt a series of marked quarries, rabbits, and pheasants released across the moors. The winner would be determined not only by the number of successful kills, but by the precision and grace of their falcon's flight, judged by a panel of conclave elders. Holmes had proposed a special prize, a rare manuscript on medieval falconry, rumored to contain secrets of the conclave's founding. It was a lure Vex could not ignore, for it promised influence over the society's future. As the morning progressed, the falconers gathered in a wide circle on the manor's lawn, their birds restless beneath their hoods. Lord Harrow, pale but resolute, stood at the center, his peregrine, Ether, perched proudly on his glove. The bird's sleek feathers gleamed in the sunlight, its sharp eyes darting beneath the hood. Harrow's presence was a statement of defiance, a signal that he would not be cowed by Vex's machinations. Vex himself arrived fashionably late, his carriage drawn by a pair of black stallions that snorted clouds of steam into the chilly air. He stepped down, his lean frame clad in a dark green coat, a falcon named Shadow on his wrist. The bird was a magnificent creature, its plumage a deep obsidian, its beak curved like a scimitar. Vex's eyes, cold and calculating, swept over the crowd, lingering on Holmes for a moment too long. The detective met his gaze with a nod, his expression unreadable. "Ladies and gentlemen of the conclave," Holmes announced, stepping forward with a commanding presence. "Today we celebrate the art of falconry and the return of our esteemed colleague, Lord Edmund Harrow. Let us test our skills and honor the traditions that bind us." The crowd murmured approval, and the contest began. One by one, the falconers released their birds, the air filling with the rush of wings and the sharp cries of pursuit. The falcons soared, their movements a ballet of instinct and training, diving to snatch their prey with breathtaking precision. Watson scribbled furiously in his notebook, capturing the spectacle for posterity. While Holmes observed not the birds, but the men and women around him, Vex's performance was flawless, his falcon shadow executing each hunt with ruthless efficiency. The crowd applauded, but Holmes noted the subtle signals Grimsby exchanged with another man near the cages, a bayed man whose face bore the weathered marks of a smuggler. The detective's suspicions deepened. Vex was not merely competing, but orchestrating something larger. As the contest neared its climax, Holmes signaled to Harrow, who nodded imperceptibly. The final round was a special challenge, a timed hunt, where each falconer's bird would pursue a single, elusive quarry, a white dove released from a hidden cage. The dove, Holmes had ensured, was trained to fly a specific path, one that would lead the falcons near a copse of trees where he had concealed a trap. Vex took his turn, his face alight with confidence as he removed Shadow's hood. The falcon launched into the sky, its wings cutting through the air like a blade. The dove darted toward the trees, and Shadow followed, its speed a blur. But as the falcon neared the copse, a net sprang from the undergrowth, ensnaring the bird mid-flight. Gasps rose from the crowd, and Vex's face twisted in fury. "What is this outrage?" he demanded, striding toward Holmes. "This is sabotage." "On the contrary, Sir Roland," Holmes replied coolly, stepping into the circle. "Your falcon has revealed its true nature. Examine its talons, if you please." The crowd pressed closer as a groundskeeper retrieved Shadow, the bird thrashing in the net. Holmes pointed to a faint residue on the falcon's claws, a greenish powder that glistened in the sunlight. "This substance," he declared, "is a rare toxin derived from a South American plant. It was used to weaken Lord Harrow's falcons, ensuring their failure in competitions and tarnishing his reputation." Vex's eyes narrowed, but he maintained his composure. "Preposterous. You have no proof this came from me." Holmes produced the ledger from the Dover auction, its pages open to a list of transactions. "This ledger, secured from your own smuggling ring, details the purchase of this toxin by your associate Grimsby. Furthermore, your steward has confessed to tampering with Harrow's birds under your orders." The conclave members murmured, their gazes shifting to Vex, who stood rigid, his jaw clenched. Holmes pressed his advantage, his voice rising with the cadence of a prosecutor. "You sought to destroy Lord Harrow and seize control of the conclave, using your wealth and influence to manipulate its members. But your greatest mistake was underestimating the loyalty of those you betrayed." At that moment, Watson stepped forward, holding up his notebook. "I have recorded every word of your conversation at the London pub, Sir Roland, decoded by Mr. Holmes. It details your plan to frame Lord Harrow for theft and sabotage the conclave's bloodline." Vex's facade crumbled, his eyes blazing with defiance. "You think you've won, Holmes? The conclave is weak, bound by outdated traditions. I would have made it strong, a force to rival any empire." His outburst was the confession Holmes had sought. The conclave elders, their faces stern, moved to surround Vex. Harrow stepped forward, his voice steady despite his ordeal. "You sought to tear us apart, Vex, but you have only united us. The conclave will endure, as will our falcons." As the elders escorted Vex away, the crowd erupted in applause, the tension breaking like a storm. Holmes and Watson withdrew to the Manor's library, where Harrow joined them, his gratitude evident in his weary smile. "You've saved more than my life, Mr. Holmes," he said. "You've preserved our legacy." Holmes inclined his head, his mind already turning to the next challenge. The game is never truly over, Lord Harrow. But for now, let us enjoy the victory." The day drew to a close with the falcons soaring once more, their cries echoing over the moors. Watson closed his notebook, satisfied with the tale he would tell, while Holmes gazed into the distance, his thoughts as inscrutable as the skies above. Chapter 9. The Feather's Final Secret. The dawn broke over Verndale Manor with a delicate mist, curling through the frost-kissed grounds like a whispered promise of secrets yet unveiled. Sherlock Holmes stood at the edge of the manor's sprawling lawn, his sharp eyes fixed on the peregrine falcon perched on Lord Edmund Harrow's gloved hand. The bird's sleek feathers glistened under the pale sunlight, its keen gaze mirroring Holmes's own relentless scrutiny. Dr. Watson, ever the Tarzan, faithful companion, stood beside him, his breath visible in the chill morning air, his notebook tucked under his arm. Ready to capture the final threads of this intricate case, Holmes's mind churned, piecing together the clues that had brought them to this moment. The peregrine, recovered from the clutches of Sir Rowland Vex's smuggling ring, was more than a prized bird, it was the key to a deeper mystery. The falcon's collar, a seemingly ornamental band of leather and silver, had caught Holmes's attention during their confrontation in the London warehouse. A faint irregularity in its stitching, barely perceptible to the untrained eye, suggested a hidden compartment. When examined under his pocket lens, it revealed a micro-engraved map, its lines so fine they seemed etched by a master jeweler. The map pointed to a location in Cornwall, a rugged stretch of cliffs known for their treacherous tides and ancient legends. Holmes had deduced it was no mere aviary, but the last sanctuary of the secret Falconer Society, a haven for the rarest birds in the world. "Watson," Holmes said, his voice low but firm, "we must prepare for a journey to Cornwall. The map suggests a hidden aviary, but I suspect it guards more than falcons. Vex's benefactor, a foreign noble whose shadow looms over this affair, may yet pose a threat. We cannot rest until every thread is tied." Watson nodded, his expression a mix of determination and weariness. "Cornwall, then." "But Holmes, what of Harrow? He's only just returned to Verndale. Can he withstand another ordeal?" "Harrow is resilient," Holmes replied, his gaze flicking to the falconer, who was murmuring softly to his peregrine. "His obsession with these birds is not mere sentiment, it's a duty to a legacy older than this manor. He will accompany us. His knowledge of the Society's secrets will be invaluable." The journey to Cornwall was arranged with haste. Harrow, though gone from his weeks in hiding, insisted on joining them, his eyes alight with a fire that belied his physical frailty. The peregrine, named Ether by Harrow, was secured in a padded crate, its sharp cries punctuating the quiet of the train carriage as they sped southwest. Holmes, Watson, and Harrow sat in a private compartment, the rhythmic clatter of the rails underscoring their tense discussion. "The Society," Harrow began, his voice rough but steady, "was founded centuries ago to protect an ancient bloodline of falcons, birds said to descend from those flown by the kings of old. Their lineage is not just a matter of breeding, it's a symbol of trust, of stewardship. The aviary in Cornwall is our last stronghold, hidden from those who would exploit it." Holmes leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "And Vex's benefactor? What do you know of this noble?" Harrow's face darkened. "Only rumors. A man of wealth, perhaps from the continent, with an interest in rare creatures. Vex hinted at his influence, but I never saw him. The Society guards its secrets fiercely, but betrayal has weakened us. The map in Ether's collar was meant to be our final safeguard." Watson scribbled notes, his brow furrowed. A foreign noble funding Vex's schemes. Could he be after the falcons for profit, or something more? "Power," Holmes said simply. "The falcons are a means to an end, a symbol of control over an ancient order. Whoever this noble is, he seeks to dismantle the society, not for wealth, but for dominance." The train arrived at St. Ives by dusk, the coastal town bathed in the golden glow of a setting sun. The trio hired a carriage to take them to the cliffs beyond, where the map indicated a concealed path leading to the aviary. The air grew sharp with salt, and the distant roar of waves crashing against jagged rocks. Holmes led the way, his lantern casting long shadows as they navigated a narrow trail winding through gorse and heather. Harrow carried Ether's crate, his steps steady despite the uneven terrain, while Watson kept a wary eye on the darkening horizon. The path ended at a sheer cliff face, its surface weathered by centuries of wind and sea. Holmes knelt, examining the rock with his lens. "Here," he said, pressing a seemingly innocuous stone. A low grinding sound echoed, and a section of the cliff slid aside, revealing a narrow passage. The air within was cool and damp, smelling of earth and feathers. Ether stirred in her crate, her talons clicking softly. "Remarkable," Watson whispered, his voice tinged with awe. A hidden sanctuary carved into the cliff itself. They stepped inside, their lanterns illuminating a vast cavern. The walls were lined with niches, each housing a falcon peregrines, kestrels, merlins, their eyes glinting like polished jewels. In the center stood a stone pedestal, etched with symbols matching those on Ether's collar. Harrow approached it, his face reverent. "This is the heart of the society," he said. "The aviary of the ancients." Holmes's eyes darted across the cavern, cataloging every detail. A sanctuary, yes, but also a fortress. "These birds are not merely protected, they are guarded." "By whom?" As if in answer, a figure emerged from the shadows, a tall man, clad in a dark cloak, his face obscured by a hood. "Lord Harrow," he said, his voice smooth and accented, "you've brought guests to our sacred place." Harrow stiffened, his hand tightening on Ether's crate. "Who are you?" "This is no place for strangers." The man lowered his hood, revealing sharp features and piercing blue eyes. "I am Count Dietrich von Krelitz, guardian of this aviary. And you, Mr. Holmes, have meddled in affairs beyond your understanding." Holmes's expression remained impassive, but his mind raced. "Von Krelitz, the foreign noble, Vex's benefactor." "Your involvement with Vex was a miscalculation, Count," Holmes said. "His arrest has exposed your ambitions. You seek to control the society, to wield its influence for your own ends." Von Krelitz smiled thinly. "The society is a relic, clinging to outdated traditions. I offered progress, a global network, with these falcons as our emblem. Vex was a tool, nothing more." Watson's hand moved to his revolver, but Holmes signaled him to stay calm. "And the ambush you've planned?" Holmes asked, his voice cutting. "Your men are positioned outside, are they not?" "A predictable move." The Count's smile faltered. "You're bluffing." Holmes stepped closer, his gaze unyielding. "Am I?" The faint scuff of boots on the cliff path, the glint of a rifle in the gorse, Your men are not as subtle as you believe. Watson, secure the entrance." Watson moved swiftly, his revolver drawn, and within moments, shouts echoed from the passage. Harrow's allies, members of the society who had followed discreetly, had outmaneuvered von Krelitz's thugs. The Count's composure cracked, his hand reaching for a concealed blade. But Holmes was faster, disarming him with a precise strike to the wrist. "You underestimated the society's loyalty," Holmes said, binding von Krelitz's hands with a cord from his coat. "And mine." The cavern was soon filled with society members, their faces a mix of relief and resolve. Harrow released Ether, who soared to a perch above the pedestal, her cry resonating through the chamber. The falcons joined in, a chorus of wild, untamed voices, as if proclaiming their freedom. Von Krelitz was escorted away, his plans unraveled, his influence shattered. The society's leaders, grateful for Holmes's intervention, revealed the aviary's true purpose, not just a sanctuary, but a repository of knowledge, encoded in the Falcon's lineage, passed down through generations. Harrow vowed to restore the society's strength, his daughter by his side. Her faith in her father renewed as they emerged from the cavern. The cliffs of Cornwall stretched before them, the sea a restless expanse under a starlit sky. Holmes paused, his eyes on the horizon. "A case well concluded, Watson," he said, a rare warmth in his tone. "But the world is never short of mysteries." Watson smiled, clapping his friend on the shoulder. "Nor you of solutions, Holmes." They returned to Verndale, the Peregrine, soaring above, a symbol of resilience and secrets kept safe. The society would endure, its legacy intact, and Holmes's name would be whispered among its members for generations. The case of the disappearing Falconer was closed, but the bond between man and bird, like the cliffs themselves, would stand against time. Chapter 10. The case closed. The fog clung to the cobblestones of Baker Street like a reluctant guest, swirling around the gas lamps as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson made their way back to 221B. The journey from Cornwall had been long. The train's rhythmic clatter a backdrop to their silent reflections on the case of Lord Edmund Harrow and his vanishing act. Watson's satchel, heavy with notes scribbled in shorthand, bumped against his thigh, a tangible reminder of the tale he would soon commit to paper. Holmes, as ever, seemed lost in thought, his sharp eyes scanning the passing cityscape as if secrets lingered in every shadow. Inside their familiar sitting room, the fire crackled with a comforting warmth, casting flickering light across the cluttered shelves and the violin resting in its case. Mrs. Hudson, ever the silent caretaker, had left a tray of tea and biscuits on the table, the porcelain steaming faintly in the cool air. Watson sank into his armchair, grateful for the familiar creak of its springs, while Holmes paced slowly, his long fingers steepled beneath his chin. "It is a curious thing, Watson," Holmes began, his voice low and measured, "how the bond between man and beast can drive such intricate webs of deception. Harrow's devotion to his falcons was no mere hobby, it was a legacy, a purpose that shaped this entire affair." Watson nodded, setting his satchel aside. "And yet it's resolved, Holmes. Harrow is safe, his peregrine recovered, and Vex is behind bars. A tidy conclusion, wouldn't you say?" Holmes's lips twitched in a faint smile, but his eyes gleamed with that restless intensity Watson knew so well. Tidy, perhaps, but not without its shadows. "Let us review the threads." Watson, before you set pen to paper. A case such as this deserves precision in its telling. Watson leaned forward, his hands clasped, ready to recount the details as Holmes preferred. The case had begun weeks ago with a summons to Verndale Manor, a sprawling estate nestled in the misty moors where Lord Edmund Harrow, a falconer of unmatched renown, had vanished during a grand hunting party. The clues had been tantalizingly sparse: a locked falconry tower, an untouched dinner plate, a single peregrine feather left on Harrow's chair. Holmes had seen through the staged disappearance at once, deducing Harrow's intent to expose a traitor within his secretive falconer society. The cryptic note found in Harrow's study, the talon strikes at dusk, had set them on a path through London's underbelly, Dover's shadowy auctions, and the wild moors, each step revealing layers of a conspiracy to undermine Harrow's legacy. The fire popped, drawing Watson's gaze for a moment before he continued. "The falconry tower was our first real breakthrough," he said, recalling the hidden pulley system that suggested Harrow's escape. "You knew he hadn't been taken, he'd orchestrated it himself." "Indeed," Holmes replied, pausing by the mantelpiece to light his pipe. The sweet scent of tobacco curled into the air. Harrow's obsession with his peregrine, the rarest of its kind, was the key. Its theft by Sir Rowland Vex pointed to a deeper motive: jealousy, yes, but also a calculated move to destabilize the society of falconers guarding an ancient bloodline of birds. Watson's mind drifted to the Dover auction, where Holmes, disguised as a wealthy collector, had navigated a den of eccentric bidders and ruthless smugglers. The ledger they'd secured there had been a treasure trove, listing Harrow's enemies and hinting at a traitor within the society. That ledger was a turning point, Watson said. It led us back to Verndale, to the moors, and that chase. Under the stars, Holmes exhaled a plume of smoke, his eyes narrowing. The moorland pursuit was a gamble, but it confirmed the steward's betrayal. His confession, though partial, gave us Harrow's journal and the truth of his plan to vanish and draw out his enemies. The journal had been a revelation, hidden in a compartment beneath Harrow's desk. Its pages detailed his fears of sabotage, his suspicions of Vex, and his audacious scheme to fake his disappearance. Harrow had known the society was infiltrated, and only by vanishing could he force the traitor's hand. The plan had nearly cost him his life, but in a gritty London warehouse, Holmes and Watson had found him, weakened but resolute. Guarding his peregrine from Vex's thugs, Watson smiled faintly. Recalling the chaos of that night, the trap sprung. Holmes's quick thinking with a makeshift distraction of scattered crates and a well-timed flare, and Harrow's weary gratitude as they led him to safety. "You outwitted Vex's men with such ease," Watson said. And then, back at Verndale, that falconry contest was a masterstroke. Holmes waved a dismissive hand, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of pride. Vex's arrogance was his undoing. By staging the contest, I gave him the stage he craved, and he could not resist boasting of his sabotage. Watson, your shorthand was invaluable, every word of his confession preserved for the authorities. The contest had been a spectacle. Falcons soaring over Verndale's fields, their wings slicing the air as society members watched, unaware of the trap closing around Vex. His confession, goaded by Holmes's subtle provocations, had been damning, and the society's swift action ensured his arrest. But it was the peregrine's collar, discovered in the final chapter of their adventure, that had unveiled the last secret, a micro-engraved map leading to a hidden aviary in Cornwall, a sanctuary for the Society's rarest birds. Watson poured tea, the clink of porcelain grounding him in the present. Cornwall was extraordinary, he said. Those cliffs, the colony of falcons thriving under Harrow's allies, it felt like the culmination of everything. Holmes nodded, settling into his chair at last. The aviary was the Society's heart, Watson. Harrow's legacy and the bloodline he protected will endure. But the foreign noble Vex's benefactor was a lingering threat. Neutralizing him required delicacy, a task for diplomatic channels rather than our usual methods. Watson raised an eyebrow. You've been in touch with Mycroft, haven't you? Holmes's smile was enigmatic. My brother has his uses. The noble's ambitions have been curtailed, his influence severed. The Society is safe, and Harrow can resume his work without fear. The room fell quiet, save for the fire's soft crackle and the distant hum of London beyond the window. Watson sipped his tea, considering the weight of the case. It had been more than a puzzle. It was a testament to loyalty, to the bond between Harrow and his falcons, and to the lengths a man would go to protect what mattered. He glanced at Holmes, who was gazing into the flames, his pipe forgotten in his hand. You're satisfied, then? Watson asked. No loose ends. Holmes's eyes flicked to him, sharp and assessing. Satisfaction is a fleeting thing, Watson. But this case, yes, it is closed. Harrow's honor is restored, the Peregrine is safe, and the Society's secrets are secure. We have done our part. Watson reached for his notebook, the urge to write stirring within him. I'll start drafting the account tomorrow. The public will eat this up, the disappearing Falconer, a tale of intrigue and loyalty. Holmes chuckled softly. Embellish as you must, but keep the facts intact. The world need not know every detail, but the essence of Harrow's struggle deserves to be told. The evening stretched on, the fire burning low as they sat in companionable silence. Watson's thoughts wandered to the moors, the auction, the warehouse, and the cliffs of Cornwall, each moment a thread in the tapestry of their adventure. He knew the story would resonate with readers, not just for its mystery, but for its heart, the quiet nobility of a man and his birds, and the relentless pursuit of truth that defined Sherlock Holmes. As the clock struck 9, Mrs. Hudson knocked softly, delivering a late post. Holmes opened the letter, his brow furrowing as he scanned its contents. A request from Inspector Lestrade, he murmured. A matter at the docks, it seems. Curious, but not urgent. Watson grinned. Another case already? Holmes folded the letter, setting it aside. Tomorrow, Watson. For now, let us savor this moment of respite. The game is always afoot, but tonight we rest. And so they did, the fire casting long shadows as the world outside continued its ceaseless churn. For Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, the case of the disappearing Falconer was closed, its secrets laid bare, its heroes restored. The story would live on, etched in Watson's pages, a testament to the enduring dance of mystery and resolution that defined their lives. The fog thickened beyond the window, but within 221B all was warm, quiet, and complete.